Chapter 3464. 200 billion godstones could expand the five elements world by at least 10%. With the expansion of the five elements world, Ji Tianqing's power would increase as well. Moreover, Ji Tianqing had refined the three supreme beings' godhead fragments, and his power would increase tremendously. Even the blood flame sacred tree, which had absorbed 200,000 soldiers, many Sir Gods and three supreme beings during the Battle of Flowing River Pass, had increased tremendously. Now, it had grown another 1,000 feet and its leaves were luxuriant. The divine power aura and crimson flame that it released were also stronger. Judging by the grade of king-level divine weapons, it was now at the peak of lower king level. Perhaps in the near future, it would devour more experts' blood souls and it might evolve into middle king level. When Ji Tianqing was refining the godhead fragments, a thought flashed across his mind. He remembered that Lin Shui had mentioned something to him previously. She had asked if there was any chance for Shui Huan's power to increase again. Sir God Shui Huan was severely injured back then and lost his divine body. Ji Tianqing had used the branch of the blood flame sacred tree to refine Shui Huan's body, allowing Shui Huan to become a high-level Sir God. Now, the blood flame sacred tree had evolved to king level. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but wonder if he would succeed if he took another branch of the blood flame sacred tree to replace Sir God Shui Huan's divine body. If he succeeded, wouldn't Sir God Shui Huan possess a king-level divine body? As long as he worked hard, he would be able to break through and become a real supreme being one day. However, if he didn't succeed, not only would Shui Huan lose his divine body, he might even lose his life. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing decided to reconsider. 1.5 years passed very quickly. The three supreme beings' godhead fragments were refined by Ji Tianqing. His power had reached the peak of second heaven God King and he was only one step away from third heaven God King. At the same time, he refined another 20 types of God Tao laws to increase his power. Now, he had mastered 420 types of laws. In terms of the number of laws, he had more than 10 types than Bai Feng, who was in 7th heaven God King realm. If Bai Feng knew this secret, her eyeballs would probably fall to the ground. What the hell? Divine King Tianqing, who was able to fight him to a draw, was only in the second layer of the Divine King realm. The number of divine Tao laws grasped was actually even more than his. After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianqing got up and stretched. He circled around the blood flame sacred tree to check on everyone's condition. Yun Yao's injuries had already recovered, and she was cultivating in seclusion. The great battle at Flowing River Pass previously enriched her actual combat experience and also let her see the disparity between herself and Divine King powerhouses. She worked even harder in her cultivation and improved her strength bit by bit. Unfortunately, after careful observation, Ji Tianqing discovered that she basically showed no signs of breaking through to the Divine King realm. It seemed like he could only place his hopes on the 7th Divine Pearl. On the other hand, Ji Ku's situation was a little out of Ji Tianqing's expectations. The time she broke through to the 9th level Divine Lord realm was a little later than Yun Yao. However, she had already reached peak Divine Lord realm and was beginning to break through to the Divine King realm. Although it was difficult to break through to the Divine King realm, it was like crossing a natural chasm. But she had already started to try, and she summarized her experience from her failures, continuously strengthening her foundation. Ji Tianqing could tell that her foundation was already very robust, and she had very high hopes of breaking through to the Divine King realm. At most 1 to 200 years, at least 3 to 5 years, she should be able to succeed. Apart from that, White Dragon, Ji Wushuang, Zhen Hong, Black Dragon, and Qian Yu were all high-rank divine lords. Everyone was cultivating bitterly with all their might, looking like they would not give up until they broke through to the Divine King realm. But Ji Tianqing was clear in his heart that not all hard work could be exchanged for rewards. Not everyone would definitely break through to the Divine King realm if they followed him. Some results were actually predestined long ago. Of course, if a massive fortuitous opportunity appeared, perhaps the outcome would change. Ji Tianqing circled around the sacred tree and prepared to leave the distorted spacetime to check on Jiang Tianyi's situation. But right at this time, the burial of heaven's voice sounded out in his mind. I have 2 pieces of good news. Do you want to hear it? Ever since the burial of heaven became a mid-rank king-grade divine artifact, it had not spoken again. This was the first time it had taken the initiative to contact Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was stunned and hurriedly asked, "What good news?" "Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes has become a god." The burial of heaven's tone was calm and emotionless. Ji Tianxing frowned and was a little dazed. "Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes? Which Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes?" The burial of heaven was probably a little speechless. After a moment of silence, it explained, "It's the old man you subdued in the profound sky continent. Later, you refined him into an ancient tree, and he has been in the sword world ever since." "Oh, so it's him." Ji Tianxing was enlightened and recalled. He chuckled and said, "It's been too long, I've forgotten about him." The burial of heaven continued to explain, "All these years, it has been rooted in the sword world, desperately absorbing heaven and earth spirit chi and resources, steadily increasing its strength. Originally, it was limited by the body of an ancient tree and could not become a god. But not long ago, I recovered to mid-rank king grade, and the sword world also expanded 100 times. The world changed greatly, divine power was abundant, and resources increased dramatically. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was the first to break through the shackles and become a true god." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said with a chuckle, "Interesting. This old man is tenacious. Even after becoming an ancient tree, he refused to give up hope of becoming a god. Now that he has become a true god, he can break free from the shackles and take human form again, moving freely." He thought for a moment and said, "How about this? Throw Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes into the 5 Elements world and let him protect my father and guide his cultivation." The burial of heaven said calmly, "He is indeed a suitable candidate. The 5 Elements world has transformed and its shackles have been released. Billions of living beings have the hope of becoming a god. Your father's aptitude is not too high, and he is still in the tribulation realm. With the protection and guidance of Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, he will definitely be able to safely pass the 9 tribulations and become a martial saint." Ji Tianxing said with a smile, "I have refined the 5 Elements world and placed it in the heaven-mending pearl. Even if those living beings become gods, they will not be able to ascend to the god realm." The burial of heaven agreed, "This is also the reason why Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes is so anxious. That is why I am informing you. Of course, the 5 Elements world is not weaker than the god realm, so there is no need to ascend." Ji Tianxing stopped discussing this matter and asked, "What is the second good news?" The burial of heaven said calmly, "The Gold Mountain King has also become a god." "The Gold Mountain King?" Ji Tianxing was startled. With his previous experience, he thought for a moment and guessed the answer. "The leader of the Earth Spirit clan in the Sword World, right?" "Yes." The burial of heaven replied and added, "The Earth Spirit clan has already multiplied to 100,000 people, and there is no lack of martial gods and martial saints among them." Ji Tianxing was quite surprised and found it hard to believe. "Those dwarfs are quite fertile, huh? I haven't paid attention to them for many years, and they have actually grown to this extent. It seems that the Earth Spirit clan is worth nurturing, and they will be useful in the future." "Understood." The burial of heaven replied and fell into a long silence, no longer speaking. Chapter 3465. Even though Ji Tianxing was already a divine king, he would only look forward and set his sights on the higher realms of the divine path and formulate a long-term plan for revenge. He would not linger on the past, nor would he waste time in reminiscing. Wuhan had not been found, and the 5 god emperors were still high above, ruling the divine realm. His blood feud had not been avenged, and the world was not at peace, but he also knew that after reaching the divine king realm, the progress of one's strength would definitely slow down. Ordinary divine king experts might only be able to break through one realm after several thousand or 10,000 years. Even a monstrous genius like him would have to spend dozens to hundreds of years before he could gradually increase his cultivation base. During this process, he would pay attention to the 5 Elements world and the sword world. When the time was right, he would secretly help and nurture the living beings of these 2 worlds. To him, the living beings of the 5 Elements world and the sword world were the foundation of his people, the foundation of his future forces. It might be difficult for them to achieve anything in the next 1,000 years. But thousands of years, 10,000 years later? Perhaps by then, the Earth Spirit clan of the Five Elements world and the Sword world would have a large number of divine lords and a small number of divine kings. That would be his people and forces. Creak, creak, creak. The stone door of the secret room opened. Ji Tianxing walked out of the secret room and came to the main hall of Tianyi Palace. Jiang Tianyi was sitting cross-legged in the main hall, silently healing himself while driving the palace south. He had to drive the palace and could not heal himself in seclusion. In this state of healing, his injuries recovered very slowly, and he had only recovered 70%. But he loved cleanliness, and his tattered white crane cloak had long been replaced with a new one, and his messy white hair was neatly combed. Tianyi, where are we now? Ji Tianxing walked in front of him and asked. Jiang Tianyi opened his eyes and greeted him, replying, Young Master Tianxing, we just entered the Red Dragon domain not long ago. Ji Tianxing nodded and asked, when crossing the border between the two domains, did you encounter any ambushes? Jiang Tianyi shook his head and said with a serious expression, ever since the battle at Flowing River Pass, we have not encountered any ambushes. The Red Dragon domain has not reacted at all. But the more it is like this, the more I feel strange and uneasy. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and analyzed, ever since the Azura God Emperor unified the entire boundless heaven continent, it has been peaceful for 1,000 years. Those divine envoys and domain lords were all arrogant. Now that something like this had happened, they would definitely not let the matter rest, nor would they try to keep the peace. Especially Stellar Aspect Emissary, he will definitely gather many domain lords and deity kings to kill me. It was just that the news of the defeat at Flowing River Pass had just spread out. They definitely had to act cautiously. In fact, they might even reformulate their plans and not be in a hurry to act. But the next time they make a move, it will definitely be a thunderous strike. That makes sense. Jiang Tianyi nodded in agreement and said in a low voice, 10 days ago, I sent a message to the Divine Attraction Paradise and asked the Jiang clan spies to help me gather information. At the same time, I also sent a message to a friend in Shemi Paradise, asking her to help me investigate the situation in the surrounding regions. I reckon it won't be long before they get back to me. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, Shemi Paradise is best at gathering information and has eyes and ears all over the world. But the people of Shemi Paradise don't care about family and only care about money and benefits. You actually have friends? Ah. Jiang Tianyi was stunned for a moment. For some reason, his face turned red and his gaze was a little evasive. Looking at his posture, Ji Tianxing vaguely understood something. Jiang Tianyi was a little embarrassed and hurriedly changed the topic, asking, Young Master Tianxing, may I ask, how did you become enemies with Stellar Aspect Emissary? Ji Tianxing replied casually, at the beginning, I only became enemies with 2 domain lords. Those 2 domain lords suffered losses and went to Stellar Aspect Emissary for support. In the end, I killed one of the 2 domain lords and the other went missing. Stellar Aspect Emissary was also heavily injured by me. From then on, Stellar Aspect Emissary gathered many deity kings and domain lords to besiege me. I see. Jiang Tianyi nodded and said with some indignation, those divine emissaries are very arrogant and domineering. They consider themselves the guards of the God Emperor and don't put anyone in their eyes. In the past, there were a few divine emissaries who went to Divine Attraction Paradise and all of them were very arrogant. Anyone who offended them would be charged with the crime of disobeying the God Emperor and rebelling against the God Emperor. But in reality, many divine emissaries are even inferior to those domain lords. In the eyes of us ancient clan disciples, those divine emissaries are the lackeys of the God Emperor, and the most arrogant and despicable one. Seeing Jiang Tianyi's reaction, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but ask, you must know that I killed a domain lord and offended a divine emissary. Aren't you worried? Worried about what? Jiang Tianyi asked subconsciously. Ji Tianxing said, about getting into trouble. TCH. Jiang Tianyi didn't think much of it and said with a smile, what's there to be afraid of? You only killed a few domain lords and offended a divine emissary, not the Azura God Emperor. Our divine attraction paradise has been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Why would we be afraid of a mere divine emissary? The two chatted for a while and Ji Tianxing told him to treat his injuries well. Jiang Tianyi said that he was fine and that his injuries had mostly healed. At this time, a stream of light suddenly flew down from the sky and landed in front of Jiang Tianyi. Jiang Tianyi's face lit up with joy and he reached out to pick up the communication jade slip, saying, "They must have found out." As he spoke, he used his divine sense to read the information in the jade slip. However, after reading the information in the jade slip, his expression became a little strange. Ji Tianxing asked, "What's wrong? What happened?" Jiang Tianyi explained, "It wasn't them who replied. It was ninth brother who asked me for help. 2 years ago, the clan sent me and 3 other brothers to the secular world to gain experience and recruit refining geniuses for the clan to replenish new blood. Ninth brother Jiang Tianxing is my half-brother from a different mother. We lived close to each other while the other 2 brothers went far away. One was in the south and the other was in the east. Jiang Tianxing stayed in the Hengshan region for half a year and spent a lot of effort to find 2 refining geniuses. He wanted to recruit them back to the Jiang clan. He didn't expect the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's second senior brother Chenlan to also be in the Hengshan region. After Chenlan heard the news, he rushed to intercept Jiang Tianxing and snatched the 2 refining geniuses. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing frowned. 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? Second disciple Chenlan? Jiang Tianyi raised his head and looked at him, asking, "Young Master Tianxing, you know about the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? You know Chenlan?" Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "As for the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect, you mentioned it before. Just like the Jiang clan, the Nangong clan, and the Raging Flame Grotto, it's an ancient clan that's proficient in crafting weapons. However, to be honest, the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's knowledge of refining is slightly better than the other clans." Chapter 3466. Jiang Tianyi's expression was a little gloomy. "Young Master Tianxing, although I admit that you are speaking the truth, I am not convinced." Cough cough. Ji Tianxing coughed to cover up his embarrassment and comforted him, "It's fine. It is normal for the big clans to rise and fall. It is only a matter of time before the Jiang clan surpasses the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect." Jiang Tianyi felt a little better and continued, "The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect has always been arrogant and has old grudges with the Jiang clan. They have always been fighting openly and secretly. However, ninth brother recruited 2 blacksmithing geniuses first. What right did Chenlan have to snatch them? Ninth brother and Chenlan had an argument and started fighting. In the end, ninth brother suffered a loss, but Chenlan did not let it go and insisted on snatching the 2 blacksmithing geniuses. How preposterous. This is too much." Speaking of this matter, Jiang Tianyi was filled with indignation and anger. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "Then what do you plan to do? Go to the Hengshan region to help your ninth brother?" Jiang Tianyi frowned and said in a low voice, "Ninth brother and I have a good relationship. He is in trouble, so I should help him. However, I want to bring you back to the Jiang clan, and now we are surrounded by so many god kings. The situation is so dangerous, I cannot complicate things." Ji Tianxing continued, "However, if you don't help, not only will your ninth brother be bullied, but the 2 blacksmithing geniuses will also be snatched away." Jiang Tianyi hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth and making a decision. "It's fine. Ninth brother rarely goes out and is inexperienced. I'll let him gain some experience with this matter. No matter how overboard Chenlan is, he won't dare to do anything to ninth brother. Otherwise, it will cause a war between the 2 clans. As for the 2 blacksmithing geniuses, it doesn't matter if they are snatched away. We can just find them in the future." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "All right, you can make the decision." After speaking, he prepared to return to the secret room and continue cultivating in the God Pagoda. However, at this moment, another ray of light flew in from the sky and landed in front of Jiang Tianyi. The ray of light dispersed and a transmission jade slip appeared. Jiang Tianyi hurriedly took the jade slip and read the message inside. After a moment, his face became gloomy and serious. "Young Master Tianxing, the friend from Shimi Grotto Heaven has replied to my letter." Ji Tianxing also had a bad premonition when he saw his solemn expression and solemn tone. What's the situation? Jiang Tianyi said in a heavy tone. My friend found out that the Red Dragon domain looks calm on the surface, but a huge storm is brewing. The domain lords of the surrounding domains seemed to be rushing to the Red Dragon domain. Moreover, not only were there more than 10 area masters rushing over, it seemed like there were 2 divine envoys as well. They might meet up in the Red Dragon domain and give us a thunderous blow. Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. He smiled and said, their target is not us, but me. Jiang Tianyi was very smart and understood what he meant. He hurriedly said, young Master Tianxing, you are looking down on me. I'm not afraid of those divine envoys and region lords. I won't back down. I want to fight alongside you and bring you back to the divine attraction paradise. Ji Tianxing smiled again and said, you must know that you represent the Jiang clan of the divine attraction paradise. You can't just say what you want. Moreover, your 9th brother is being bullied in the Hengshan region. You should go there to help him. Jiang Tianyi said firmly, young Master Tianxing, you are the benefactor of the Jiang clan. Now that you are in trouble, how can we just sit by and do nothing? As for going to the Hengshan region to help my 9th brother, I think it's a good idea. Let's go together. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Divine Envoy Xingxiong must have gathered more than 10 area masters in the Red Dragon domain. He must have set up a trap. Since that's the case, there's no need for us to fight him head-on. Let's take a detour to the Hengshan region. If they continued to fly south, they would pass through the entire Red Dragon domain. It would take at least half a month. However, the Hengshan region was southwest of the Red Dragon domain. They could avoid Divine Envoy Xingxiong's ambush by taking a detour. Originally, Jiang Tianyi didn't want to go to the Hengshan region to help Jiang Tianxing. Now that he knew about Divine Envoy Xingxiong's scheme and Ji Tianxing's agreement, he changed direction and flew to the Hengshan region. 10 days later. Heaven Dragon Pass in the southern part of the Red Dragon domain. It was located at the southern border of the Red Dragon domain. 100,000 miles south would be out of the Red Dragon domain. Heaven Dragon Pass was located in a towering mountain range. The mountains were steep and the cliffs were tens of thousands of feet high. Compared to the Manchuan Pass in the Fire Mulberry domain, this pass was smaller but the terrain was more dangerous. Originally, this was the border between the 2 domains. It was an important pass and a place to fight for. However, the boundless heaven continent had been peaceful for thousands of years. There were no wars between the domains. Normally, there were only 100,000 soldiers stationed at Heaven Dragon Pass. Moreover, the 100,000 soldiers were relatively free. They spent their days patrolling and cultivating. Until 10 days ago, the peace of Heaven Dragon Pass was broken. First, the area master of the Red Dragon domain led several emperors and more than 200 Sir God experts to Heaven Dragon Pass. The 100,000 soldiers were ready for battle. They were ready to listen to the orders of the area master and the emperors. Then, the area master of the Red Dragon domain and his deputy worked together to set up a divine array. The emperors, more than 200 Sir God experts, and the 100,000 soldiers helped. In 10 days, they set up 3 king-level divine arrays. Heaven Dragon Pass became impregnable. It was surrounded by divine arrays. Its lethality was terrifying. During this time, the area masters of other domains led a large number of Sir God experts and arrived at Heaven Dragon Pass. These area masters and Sir God experts did not rest after arriving at Heaven Dragon Pass. They also joined the ranks of setting up divine arrays. The entire Heaven Dragon Pass was filled with a tense and austere atmosphere. Everyone knew that an earth-shattering battle was about to arrive very soon. Just like the Manchuan Pass in the Fire Mulberry domain. Until today, there were 17 area masters and more than 20 Sir God experts gathered in Heaven Dragon Pass. Tonight, a few more super noble god kings arrived at the Heaven Dragon Mountain Pass mysteriously and silently. The 100,000 soldiers were not qualified to know their identities. However, the 20 Sir God experts gathered in the Commander-in-Chief's palace saw their true faces. There were 4 of them. 3 of them were honorable divine envoys. Divine Envoy Xingxiong was the leader. Divine Envoy Ku Yun and Divine Envoy Zhong Ying assisted. As for the fourth Sir God, it was the area master of the neighboring Fire Mulberry domain, Sir God King Bifong. All the Sir God experts present had heard of the battle at Manchwan Pass and Sir God King Bifong's encounter. Everyone looked at Bifong with eyes full of sympathy. Bifong did not say anything. She stood silently among the many Sir God experts. She was not conspicuous. Divine Envoy Xing Xiong's injuries had not healed. However, it did not seem to affect him on the surface. His face was gloomy. His eyes were sharp. His entire body was filled with killing intent. His gaze swept across the many Sir God experts in the hall. He said in a deep voice, "The traitors led by Tianxing went all the way south and killed several area masters and Sir God experts. This is the first time such a thing has happened in 1,000 years. It is simply appalling. It is so cruel that it makes one's hair stand on end. I do not wish to speak any more nonsense. In short, we have gathered a large number of troops this time. 30 Sir God experts are overseeing. We must kill them at Heaven Dragon Pass. If we let them escape, everyone here will take their own lives to atone for their sins, including me." Chapter 3467. There was dead silence in the hall. The air was heavy and oppressive. Everyone could clearly feel the determination of stellar aspect Divine Envoy. But they were not worried or afraid. Instead, they were full of confidence. Nonsense. 30 God King experts, close to 1,000 God monarchs, and 100,000 soldiers. With such a grand lineup, not to mention dealing with a few foreign race God Kings, even annihilating 2 God Envoy teams would not be a problem. As long as those foreign race God Kings passed through Heaven Dragon Pass, they would die without a doubt. This plan was set. Everyone only needed to wait patiently. However, it was because those foreign race God Kings had not appeared and their whereabouts were unknown that Stellar Aspect was uneasy. He looked at the night sky outside the hall and muttered to himself with a dark expression, "According to the speed of those traitors, they should be arriving at Heaven Dragon Pass soon." God Envoy Ku Yun and God Envoy Zhon Ying nodded in agreement. "That's right. Next, everyone should enter a state of combat readiness and hide their auras as much as possible, waiting for those traitors to walk into the trap. With the lesson learned at Flowing River Pass, they will definitely be more cautious. So, we need to make some preparations and send a few scouts to search the vicinity. As long as those traitors pass through Heaven Dragon Pass, they will die without a burial place. But the only uncertainty is whether they will pass through Heaven Dragon Pass or not. By the way, Stellar Aspect, didn't you say that this God King Bifong has extraordinary talent and can detect the traitors' whereabouts? Why don't you let him check where those traitors are now? How far are they from Heaven Dragon Pass?" The gazes of the 2 God Envoys landed on the crowd and gathered on Bifong. More than 20 God King experts also looked at him with burning eyes. Many of them had jealousy hidden in their eyes. After all, Bifong could attract the attention and high regard of the 3 God Envoys. He would definitely have good fortune in the future. Stellar Aspect nodded slightly and looked at Bifong. He said, "Bifong, you have the talent of God's eye. You can predict fortune and misfortune, and deduce heavenly secrets. Moreover, you have met those traitors and fought with them before. You are not unfamiliar with their situation. At this crucial moment, I will have to trouble you to cast a spell and deduce their whereabouts." Stellar Aspect status was higher than Bifong's. But he was not as strong as Bifong and they were old friends. In front of so many God Kings, Stellar Aspect Divine Emissary was very polite to him. Bifong naturally did not dare to decline. He also knew that his biggest purpose in coming to Tianlong Mountain Pass was not to participate in the battle. Instead, he used his divine eyes of annihilation to help everyone search for Ji Tianxing and the others. This king will naturally obey Lord Stellar Aspect Envoy's orders. Bifong cupped his hands and bowed. He then walked out of the crowd and stood in the middle of the hall. The other God Kings retreated in a hurry. They stood at the edge of the hall and watched Bifong cast her technique quietly. Bifong took out 9 mysterious flags and planted them on the ground of the palace to form a simple divine formation. After that, he withdrew an ancient fiery copper geomantic compass and sat cross-legged on the ground. 3 divine envoys, please lend me a hand. Bai Feng made her request. The 3 divine envoys did not hesitate and quickly followed his instructions. They stood in different positions and cast spells to assist him. Next, Bai Feng focused on using a secret technique. She activated the Annihilation Divine Eye and deduced the location of the Palace of Heaven's Will. The hall was silent, and time passed quietly. 4 hours quickly passed. Many of the God Kings were getting impatient. They secretly transmitted their voices to each other and questioned whether Bai Feng was reliable or not. Fortunately, Bai Feng's technique was nearing its end, and he had finally deduced the result. The 9 mysterious flags all shone with a dazzling divine light. The fiery copper geomantic compass in his hand also released a 7-colored divine light. 10 streaks of divine light converged above his head, forming a screen of light that resembled a sea of stars. It was dazzling, vast, and profound. A boundless and vast aura emanated from the screen of light. The 20-odd God Kings in the hall, including the 3 divine envoys, all wore solemn expressions. A hint of respect and wariness arose in their hearts. The God Kings who had secretly doubted Bai Feng all shut their mouths. They did not dare to doubt him anymore. As the saying went, once an expert made a move, the truth would be revealed. Among the 30 God Kings, Bai Feng was not the strongest. He could only be ranked in the top 5. However, his divine ability and consummate skill had shocked everyone. Soon, a hazy and blurry image appeared on the light screen that was as vast as the starry sky. A blurry divine ship streaked across the sky and sea of clouds like a bolt of lightning and landed in the middle of a towering mountain range. If one looked carefully, they would discover that there seemed to be an ancient city in the depths of the mountain range. However, the image stopped there and quickly dissipated. Whoosh! The screen of light dissipated. The 9 flags and the fiery copper geomantic compass fell silent and became dim. Bai Feng ended his technique and opened his eyes. The 20-odd God Kings stared at him. The 3 divine envoys could not wait to ask about the result. How was it? Did you find their whereabouts? Bai Feng, where are those traitors now? Are they close to the Heaven Dragon Pass? Facing the 3 divine envoys' anxious gazes, Bai Feng's expression was a little strange. He pondered for a moment before putting away the 9 flags and the fiery copper geomantic compass. The divine eye of annihilation on his forehead also closed. Seeing his strange expression, divine envoy Xingxiong asked even more anxiously, Bai Feng, what happened? Tell me. Bai Feng hesitated for a moment before saying in a low voice, Lord Divine Envoys, those traitors are very far away from us. They are not in the Red Dragon domain. The 3 divine envoys' eyes widened when they heard this. The 20-odd God Kings were also stunned and could not help but exclaim. What? Not in the Red Dragon domain? Are you kidding me? Did we do all this for nothing? Bai Feng, you must be mistaken, right? I just said that he's definitely not reliable. Divining heavenly secrets and predicting good or bad luck? That's ridiculous. I can't believe you can say such ridiculous things. The originally silent hall exploded with discussions, exclamations, and doubts. Bai Feng became the target of public criticism and was criticized and denied by many God Kings. Divine Envoy Xingxiong's expression was gloomy. He waved his hand to signal for everyone to be quiet. He stared at Bai Feng with a dignified gaze and asked seriously, Bai Feng, our spies clearly detected that those traitors passed through the Fire Mulberry domain and went south into the Red Dragon domain. Are you sure they are not in the Red Dragon domain now? Others did not believe Bai Feng, but he did. Bai Feng nodded and said with certainty, I'm very sure. Then where are they? Divine Envoy Xingxiong asked. Bai Feng frowned and thought for a moment before replying, in the southwest, in the Hengshan domain. It seems to be in the Hengshan Empire. The 20-odd God Kings were still questioning and discussing Bai Feng, but Divine Envoy Xingxiong suppressed them with a dignified manner. He discussed with Ku Yun and Zhon Ying for a moment and quickly made a decision. Pick 15 God Kings to stay at Heaven Dragon Pass and wait for orders. The other 11 God Kings are to immediately rush to the Hengshan Empire. Bai Feng, come with us first and rush there as fast as you can. Chapter 3468. This was the decision made by the 3 divine messengers after a discussion. The 20 or so god kings present had no right to question him. They could only obey. Moreover, Bai Feng spoke with certainty and certainty. The many god kings found it hard to refute. Since the 3 divine envoys believed that it was true, then he would take it as true for the time being. Soon, the 3 groups of people were selected and prepared. Of the 15 god kings, 6 of them were domain lords. All of them were left in the Heaven Dragon Pass, waiting for the next target. This was also in case Bai Feng's calculation was wrong. If Ji Tianxing and the others entered the Tianlong Pass, they would at least have enough power to eliminate them. The other 11 god kings were led by a higher god king as they drove their divine ships towards the Hongshan Empire. As for the 3 divine envoys and Bai Feng, they took the lead and left Tianlong Pass on a top king-grade divine artifact. That divine artifact was called the void-piercing hairpin. It was said that it was a relic left behind by the mother of the Shadow Executioner divine envoy. It wasn't an offensive or defensive divine artifact. Instead, it was a flying divine artifact that could travel through space and travel through outer space. In the boundless universe, the sky-piercing hairpin could travel thousands of miles in an instant. Flying in the divine realm, one's speed would increase by several folds. Ordinary god kings would need half a month to reach Hongshan region's Hongshan Empire. As for the 3 divine envoys and Bai Feng, relying on the power of the space-piercing hairpin, they would only need about 5 days to arrive. The reason why the 4 of them went first was that the space inside the hairpin was limited and could not fit so many people. If he wanted to continuously teleport and travel through space, he would have to expend a huge amount of divine power. The 4 of them had to take turns to replenish the sky-piercing hairpin with divine power. Moreover, with each additional person, the consumption of divine power would multiply. If it wasn't for the fact that Bai Feng possessed the divine eyes of annihilation, he would still need to deduce the heavenly secrets to find Ji Tianxing and the others. With God Envoy Zhong Ying's personality, he probably wouldn't even want to bring him along. Hongshan Region, Hongshan Empire. In the endless Tranquil mountain range, there was a majestic ancient city that had existed for 10,000 years. It was called Tranquil City. This city was located in a remote area, in a vast mountain range with a radius of a few million miles. Usually, the number of gods and commoners that came to this place was far fewer than the other main cities of the Hongshan Empire. However, Tranquil City was located on top of a divine vein, so the divine power of heaven and earth was abundant. The millions of miles of mountain range around the majestic city contained an endless supply of cultivation resources and treasures. As a result, the millions of celestial citizens in Perpetual Joy City were blessed by the heavens. They had countless experts and geniuses. After tens of thousands of years, the city still showed signs of vicissitudes. However, the city was exceptionally prosperous and prosperous. More than 6 million people of the god race lived and worked in peace. It was quite lively. The various trades and professions related to the cultivation of the divine way had also developed and expanded to the peak. Every few years or decades, Tranquil City would have a few great grandmasters who specialized in alchemy, artifact forging, or formations. Of course, those were all divine Lord Realm powerhouses. If they were older, they would be respected by the people and would be recruited by the powerful forces of the empire. However, every few decades, a few younger grandmasters would emerge. This was the proverbial genius. All kinds of alchemy geniuses, artifact forging geniuses, array formation geniuses, the citizens of Tranquil City were already used to it. A few months ago, Jiang Tianxing shouldered the Jiang clan's recruitment mission and came to the Hongshan Empire. After many searches and tests, he still couldn't find the ideal refining genius. Unknowingly, he heard that Tranquil City was blessed by the heavens and had many geniuses. Therefore, Jiang Tianxing came to Tranquil City full of anticipation and started to search for a target. He was different from Jiang Tianyi. Jiang Tianyi wanted to save time and directly occupied a land with a spirit vein. He spread the news to the outside world and challenged all the artifact forging grandmasters. In order to attract those artifact forging grandmasters, he pretended to be arrogant and set generous rewards. Then, He would choose a suitable person from the many artifact forging grandmasters. Jiang Tianxing kept a low profile and wandered around Chang'e City, secretly observing and looking for a suitable target. Speaking of which, his luck was not bad. 10 days ago, 2 young geniuses had set up an arena at 100 Flower Garden in the southern part of the city and competed in terms of strength and artifact forging. After asking around, Jiang Tianxing found out that those 2 young geniuses were the most famous young geniuses in Chang'e City in the past 100 years. One of them was the first young master of a grand family called Lin Zhan. The other was the first senior brother of Chang'e Dao College called Zhon Longxiang. Both of them were very young and had just become high-level divine lords not long ago. They were skilled in artifact forging. As the saying went, a mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers. Moreover, these 2 top geniuses were equally proud and arrogant. Apart from cultivating the divine Tao, they were also skilled in artifact forging. The citizens of Chang'e City were divided into 2 factions, each supporting Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang. The 2 factions often argued and felt that their idols were the number 1 geniuses. For the title of number 1 genius of Chang'e City, Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang had been at odds with each other for many years. This time, the 2 geniuses argued again and competed in front of everyone in 100 Flower Garden to determine a winner. Jiang Tianxing snuck into 100 Flower Garden and observed the entire process. In the end, Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang were equally matched in strength. After fighting for half a day, there was still no winner. The 2 changed to artifact forging to see who could forge a supreme-grade monarch artifact faster. In the end, there was still no winner. Both of them took the same amount of time and created divine artifacts with their own merits. The spectating citizens were not satisfied and were used to this result. However, Jiang Tianxing was ecstatic because he had picked up a treasure. This was because Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang were the young geniuses he was looking for. He was confident that as long as he recruited these 2 geniuses into the Jiang clan and nurtured them well, they would become divine blacksmiths in the future. As for loyalty, Jiang Tianxing was not worried because the Jiang clan had rules. Anyone who entered the Jiang clan with a different surname had to marry a member of the Jiang clan to be recognized by the Jiang clan. This way, their descendants would also have the bloodline of the Jiang clan. This way, the Jiang clan would be able to absorb new blood and strengthen their foundation. Jiang Tianxing used a little trick to find Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang and tried to recruit them. The 2 geniuses were very proud, but Jiang Tianxing's casual demonstration of his skills stunned them. Then, he revealed his identity and background, as well as his strength as a middle-level divine blacksmith, which won the respect of the 2 geniuses. With his glib tongue, the 2 geniuses understood the Jiang clan's strong foundation and saw the hope of becoming divine blacksmiths. Therefore, the 2 geniuses were willing to follow Jiang Tianxing and cultivate in the Jiang clan. However, something awkward happened. When the agreed time came, Jiang Tianxing wanted to bring the 2 geniuses out of Chang'e City, but they both changed their minds. The reason was simple. The 2 geniuses were like fire and water. If there was one, there would be no other. No matter how Jiang Tianxing tried to persuade or mediate, the 2 geniuses would not give in. He could only bring one of them with him. At this moment, the second disciple of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, Chen Lan, appeared. Chapter 3469. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect and the Jiang clan had an old grudge that hadn't been resolved even after thousands of years. Although Kenshin had helped the Jiang clan to tide over the crisis and suppressed the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect in the past, the Jiang clan was still in danger. However, the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect would never forget this grudge. However, the boundless heaven continent was unified, and the Azura God Emperor controlled the world, desiring to disintegrate the various great ancient clans. The 18 ancient clans had no choice but to form an alliance. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect could only suppress their hatred and temporarily not fight with the Jiang clan to avoid destroying the ancient clan alliance. But even so, it was inevitable for them to fight in the dark. Jiang Tianxing had left the divine attraction paradise not only to gain experience in the mortal world, but also to take on the mission of recruiting disciples. However, Chen Lan was different. He was only using an excuse to leave the 100 Refinement Ancient sect to settle some old grudges in the Hongshan Empire. Coincidentally, he came to Perpetual Joy City and sensed the aura of a divine king expert. Only then did he find Jiang Tiansheng. Then, he learned that Jiang Tiansheng had recruited 2 refining geniuses, so he wanted to snatch them away. The Jiang clan wanted to absorb new blood, but so did the 100 Refinements Ancient sect. In fact, the 18 ancient clans had to constantly absorb geniuses from other clans in order to maintain their prosperity for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, Chen Lan knew that the 2 geniuses were not on good terms with each other, so she was even more determined to snatch him away. He also found 2 geniuses and used his identity as a disciple of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect to recruit them. Furthermore, he praised the 100 Refinement Ancient sect to the heavens and banished the Jiang clan to the ground. He wanted to kidnap the 2 geniuses back. However, the 2 geniuses were very stubborn, and were resolutely unwilling to travel with each other. Chen Lan could only think of another way. When Jiang Tiansheng found out about this, he went to confront Chen Lan in a fit of rage. When the 2 of them met, it was inevitable that they would quarrel, ridicule, and humiliate each other. Afterwards, the 2 of them got into a conflict and fought fiercely in the mountains outside the city, destroying tens of thousands of li of mountains and rivers. Chen Lan was the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. He had cultivated for 10,000 years and was at the peak of the 6th level of the God King realm. Jiang Tiansheng was the 9th young master of the Jiang clan. He had only cultivated for 7,000 years and was at the 5th level of the Divine King realm. The result was obvious. Jiang Tiansheng was at a disadvantage and even suffered some injuries. Fortunately, both of them restrained themselves. It was more of a spar, and neither of them dared to use too much force. If things got out of hand and the Jiang clan started a war with the 100 Refinement Ancient sect, they would definitely be blamed by the other clans. After the conflict, Jiang Tiansheng felt wronged and sent a message to Jiang Tianyi asking for help. The matter of recruiting the 2 geniuses had reached a stalemate. Both Jiang Tiansheng and Chen Lan were caught between a rock and a hard place. They could only try their best to persuade the 2 geniuses. It was a little unrealistic to take in both geniuses. However, both of them were unwilling to accept only one and give the other to the other. Of course, it wasn't as if they hadn't considered kidnapping the 2 geniuses by force. But he couldn't do that. After all, the Jiang clan and the 100 Refinements Ancient sect could not afford to lose face like this. The primordial ancient clan had once stood at the peak of the continent, looking down on the common people. Now, if they wanted to recruit disciples from other clans, they actually had to resort to robbery. This was too humiliating. The sun was setting. In the Green Phoenix Manor, north of Tranquil City, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and Jiang Tiansheng sat at the stone table under the pine tree, calmly drinking tea. This manor was located at the peak of Green Phoenix Peak, 800 miles north of Tranquil City. The entire manor was shrouded in clouds. The 3 of them sat in the manor, overlooking the nearby Tranquil City. Jiang Tiansheng rubbed his brows in distress and said to Jiang Tianyi, 7th brother, the situation is like this. That brat Chen Lan is unreasonable and despicable. No matter what, we can't let him have his way. Otherwise, the Jiang clan will be humiliated and I won't be able to raise my head in front of him in the future. Jiang Tianyi nodded slightly and said calmly, although Chen Lan is strong, there is nothing to be afraid of. We'll go and meet him later. The main problem now is that the 2 young geniuses are competing with each other and can't tolerate each other. If we want to bring both of them back to the Jiang clan, we have to find a way to resolve the conflict and persuade them. Jiang Tiansheng nodded and said, yes. Chen Lan saw this point and pestered us relentlessly. He won't give up no matter what. His goal is clear. He has to snatch at least one of the young geniuses. If he works harder and manages to snatch both of them, he'll have profited greatly. This brat is too shameless. I was the one who discovered the 2 geniuses first. At the mention of this matter, Jiang Tiansheng was filled with anger and kept complaining. Although he and Jiang Tianyi were half-brothers, their height and appearance were very similar, but Jiang Tianyi was different. However, There was a clear difference in the way they dressed and their temperaments. Jiang Tianyi had a head of white hair and wore a robe made of crane feathers. His clothes were snow white and his personality was more stable. Jiang Tianxing, on the other hand, had a head of golden hair and wore dark gold armor. He carried a divine sword on his back and his personality was more impulsive and immature. The two brothers discussed for a while but couldn't think of a feasible solution. Ji Tianxing, who had been silent all this time, spoke up at the right time. The situation isn't complicated. We can't let Chen Lan have his way and we can't forcefully kidnap the two geniuses. Let's go find Chen Lan and force him to back down. Then, we'll find the two young geniuses and think of a way to persuade them to bring them back to the Jiang clan. There's no time to lose. Let's act quickly. Jiang Tianyi nodded and stood up subconsciously. Jiang Tianxing sat on the stone chair and turned his head to look at Ji Tianxing. He frowned and asked Jiang Tianyi, "Seventh brother, who is this person? Didn't I introduce him to you just now?" Jiang Tianyi glared at him unhappily. "This is young Master Tianxing, my friend." Jiang Tianxing frowned again and asked softly, "Seventh brother, this is a grudge between the Jiang clan and the 100 Refinements ancient sect. It's not appropriate for you to bring an outsider into this matter, right?" Jiang Tianyi purposely put on a stern face and slapped the back of his head. He said unhappily, "Little Jew, be more polite to young Master Tianxing. Don't be rude. He's one of us, not an outsider. He's just a friend and not a disciple of the Jiang clan. How can he not be an outsider?" Jiang Tianxing held the back of his head and muttered, "If we really bring him to deal with Chen Lan, the 100 Refinements ancient sect will definitely use this as an excuse and will be criticized by the other clans." Jiang Tianyi became even angrier and stared at him with a stern face. He shouted coldly, "Little Jew, can you not be so stubborn? You don't believe me, right? Do you want me to tell you his true identity before you'll stop?" Hearing this, Jiang Tianxing's eyes lit up. He looked up expectantly and asked, "What do you mean, seventh brother? What other identity does he have? Tell me quickly." Jiang Tianyi realized that he had let it slip in a moment of desperation. However, Jiang Tianxing didn't let it go and insisted on telling him the answer. Jiang Tianyi was annoyed and could only sigh. He said solemnly, "Little Jew, I'm only telling you this because you're my brother. However, you must keep it a secret." Jiang Tianxing was filled with anticipation and excitement. He nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Jiang Tianyi said with a serious face, "This young Master Tianxing is the great benefactor who saved our Jiang clan 1,000 years ago. Second uncle and third uncle are his in-name disciples. His our Master Grandpa." Huh? Jiang Tianxing was petrified. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3470. Master Grandpa? Seventh brother, are you sure? I've never heard that you have such a friend. You didn't manage to recruit any armament refining geniuses and instead found a Master Grandpa for us? Jiang Tianxing regained his senses and was filled with disbelief and unwillingness. He looked at Jiang Tianyi and Ji Tianxing strangely. How can the benefactor who saved the Jiang clan 1,100 years ago be so young? Jiang Tianyi frowned. "Ninth brother, can you not be so shallow? Isn't it normal for an expert like young Master Tianxing to remain young forever?" Jiang Tianxing still didn't believe him and asked again, "Since that benefactor could save the Jiang clan and make second uncle and third uncle admire him, he must be at least a peak god king. Even if he isn't a peak god king, he should be a 9th stage realm upper level god king, right? What about this young Master Tianxing? What realm is he at now?" Jiang Tianyi was speechless and couldn't answer. No choice, he couldn't see through Ji Tianxing's cultivation realm. He could only see that Ji Tianxing's aura was restrained and his power was unfathomable. However, he recalled that Ji Tianxing had fought with Bai Feng for a long time and he wasn't able to defeat her. It was imaginable that Ji Tianxing shouldn't be a upper-level god king. Even if he was, his power should be about the same as Bai Feng, around the 7th stage of the god king realm. This was indeed a suspicious point that couldn't be explained. Jiang Tianxing stared at him and asked, "Seventh brother, why aren't you talking?" Jiang Tianyi frowned and said sternly, "Ninth brother, How can you be so rude to question someone's cultivation realm? Anyway, you only need to know that young Master Tianxing can deal with Chen Lan from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sec. Really? Jiang Tianxing was still suspicious and sized up Ji Tianxing before asking Jiang Tianyi, seventh brother, you can't joke about this. Since you're sure that he's the benefactor of the Jiang clan, why didn't you report to the clan leader? Jiang Tianyi stared at him and said, what's the use of reporting to the clan leader? Young Master Tianxing has already agreed to return to the divine attraction paradise with me. At that time, I want to give everyone a surprise. Hee hee. Jiang Tianxing put on a fake smile and curled his lips. Anyway, this is your idea. It has nothing to do with me. Don't drag me into it. You. Jiang Tianyi clenched his teeth in anger, wishing he could beat him up. This clearly showed that they didn't believe him and felt that he was fooling around. They were afraid that they would be implicated by him and be punished by the patriarch. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing said indifferently, Jiang Tianxing, whether you believe it or not, let's put this matter aside for now. The most important thing right now is to have Jiang Tianyi accompany you to find Chen Lan and resolve this matter as soon as possible. We don't have much time to waste. With his reminder, Jiang Tianyi finally remembered that stellar aspect divine envoy, domain lords, and god kings were searching for them. The Hongshan region was right next to the Crimson Dragon region. If they were delayed for too long, there was no guarantee that divine king stellar aspect and company would not come looking for them. Therefore, this matter had to be resolved quickly. Yes, yes, yes. Jiang Tianyi hurriedly nodded and said to Jiang Tianxing, ninth brother, where is Chen Lan? Let's go find him now. This matter cannot be delayed, lest something unexpected happens. Jiang Tianxing pointed to the southwest of Changle City and said, that guy is at the Gold Laurel Palace. All right, let's go meet him now. Jiang Tianyi nodded and pulled Jiang Tianxing into the sky, flying towards Changle City. After flying for 1,000 feet, he realized that Ji Tianxing did not follow and was still standing in the manor. Moreover, Ji Tianxing sat back on the stone bench and continued drinking tea. Jiang Tianyi was stunned and asked without hesitation, young Master Tianxing, why, aren't you coming with us? Ji Tianxing nodded and smiled. It's enough for the two of you to go. I'll wait here for your good news. This. Jiang Tianyi was immediately put in a difficult position. He smiled bitterly and said, young Master Tianxing, if you don't come with us, I don't feel confident. Jiang Tianxing curled his lips and looked at Ji Tianxing with a smile that was not a smile. He said, you don't dare to go. Are you afraid that if we really fight, you'll be exposed? As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Tianyi slapped him on the back of his head and said unhappily, if you don't know how to speak, then shut up. Jiang Tianxing saw that his seventh brother was really angry and obediently shut up. Jiang Tianyi flew back to the manor and came before Ji Tianxing. He bowed sincerely and said, young Master Tianxing, my ninth brother is young and inexperienced. He has always lived in the divine attraction grotto heaven and this is the first time he has gone out to train. Therefore, he spoke without thinking and offended you. Please don't lower yourself to his level. Jiang Tianxing was the ninth genius of the Jiang clan and was called the ninth young master. He had a noble status. In the divine attraction grotto heaven, he was used to living like a prince. However, he had lived for 7,000 years and was called young and inexperienced by Jiang Tianyi. Ji Tianxing was speechless. After all, he had lived for less than 2,000 years in both lifetimes. There was no comparison between people. However, since Jiang Tianyi said so, he had to go. Otherwise, it would seem that he was too petty and would really argue with Jiang Tianxing. Helpless, Ji Tianxing could only nod and say, Jiang Tianyi, you misunderstand. Since you insist on inviting me, then I'll go with you. Seeing that he agreed, Jiang Tianyi breathed a sigh of relief. Then, the three of them flew through the sky and went straight to the Gold Osmanthus Palace in the southwest of Changle City. The sun gradually set and night was about to arrive. The Gold Osmanthus Palace was lit. Chen Lan, dressed in a black robe, was sitting in the study and carefully reading a book. He looked like a young man in his 30s. He was tall and muscular, with thick eyebrows and big eyes. Behind him stood a white-haired elder in a black robe, dressed like a bodyguard. He stood with his hands by his side. Young Master Lan, this is the detailed information on Lin Zhan and the Battle Dragon Elephant, including the Lin clan and Changle Dao College. I have investigated it thoroughly. I think that if we want to recruit these two blacksmithing geniuses, we can find another breakthrough and have a chance. Chen Lan nodded and said, "Okay, then I will take a good look at this information." At this moment, the voice of a guard sounded at the door of the study. "Sir, there is a young man with the surname Jiang outside. He wants to see you." Obviously, only the white-haired elder was from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. He followed Chen Lan to serve and protect him. All the guards and maids in the Gold Osmanthus Palace were from Changle City. However, Chen Lan had spent a considerable amount of money to rent this palace temporarily. Jiang Tiansheng? That brat is here to humiliate himself again. Chen Lan closed the book and put it into his spatial ring. His lips curled into a cold smile. "Uncle Yang, let's go see what that brat is up to." With that, he brought Uncle Yang out of the study and rushed to the guest hall. In the hall, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianxing, and Jiang Tianyi were all seated and drinking tea. As soon as Chen Lan entered the hall, he laughed mockingly and said, "Jiang Tianxing, was the beating from before not enough? Do you want to be beaten again tonight?" Chapter 3471. His voice was heard before he even saw him. Chen Lan's arrogant tone caused Jiang Tianxing's face to turn green. His eyes were filled with anger. He immediately stood up and retorted coldly, "Chen Lan, don't be so smug. Tonight, my seventh brother will teach you a lesson and let you know the immensity of heaven and earth." As soon as Jiang Tianxing finished speaking, Chen Lan appeared in the main hall with the white-robed old man. He glanced at Jiang Tianxing before his gaze landed on Jiang Tianyi and Ji Tianxing. As for Ji Tianxing, he only glanced at him and skipped over him. After all, Ji Tianxing was drinking tea with a calm expression. His aura was restrained and he was as low-key as an ordinary person. On the other hand, Jiang Tianyi's face was stern and his body emitted a divine aura that could not be underestimated. Chen Lan sized Jiang Tianyi up and sneered, "Haha. Did you beat up the small one and then the big one came? Jiang Tianxing, you're really something. You're a piece of trash and you asked your brother to support you. I was wondering why you suddenly became so bold and dared to take the initiative to come here. So it's because you found a backer." As he spoke, Chen Lan sat down on the main seat and said disdainfully, "It's a pity that your seventh brother, Jiang Tianyi, is not my match. You guys are destined to be humiliated." Chen Lan's words and attitude were extremely arrogant. He did not put Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi in his eyes at all. Jiang Tianyi's face turned green as he clenched his fists tightly. Jiang Tianyi, on the other hand, was calm. He looked at Chen Lan with a cold smile and said mockingly, "My ninth brother is the youngest among the 9 geniuses of the Jiang clan and is ranked last. You, the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, are proud of defeating him and are still acting so smug. It seems like the disciples of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect are only so capable." "What did you say?" Chen Lan's face darkened and his eyes were filled with anger. Jiang Tianyi laughed even more mockingly and said, "Although I'm only ranked 7th among the 9 disciples of the Jiang clan, it's still enough. Against you, the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, it's enough. You dare to look down on me?" Chen Lan's expression darkened as he growled angrily, "Kid, if I don't teach you an unforgettable lesson, you won't know how powerful I am." As he spoke, his entire body burst forth with surging divine power aura. Clearly, he was about to attack. But Jiang Tianyi smiled contemptuously and said, "Talking to a boor like you is really tiring. Very angry, right? You want to fight, don't you? It's a pity that Lin Zhan and the Battle Dragon Elephant are not going to compete in fighting, but in refining weapons." Chen Lan frowned deeply and remained silent. Indeed, he had defeated Jiang Tianxing. However, Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiong were not persuaded by him to follow him back to the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect. After a moment of silence, he asked, "So what you mean is, you want to compete with me in refining?" "Of course." Jiang Tianyi sneered with a mocking expression. "We're all disciples of forging families. What else can we compete in? Could it be that they were going to have a duel?" Then let our second brother compete with you. I guarantee that he will beat you up so badly that even your mother won't be able to recognize you. You're courting death." Chen Lan was so angry that his face turned black and his chest rose and fell rapidly. The white-haired elder frowned slightly and hurriedly sent a message to remind him, "Young Master Lan, please calm down. The other party obviously came prepared and purposely provoked you." Only then did Chen Lan come to his senses and nod silently. He then looked at Jiang Tianyi and asked, "Tell me, how do you want to compete?" Jiang Tianyi answered without hesitation, "We'll compete to see who can successfully forge the most perfect divine weapon in the shortest amount of time. Whoever loses will withdraw from this competition and will not be allowed to touch the two forging geniuses." Seeing how confident Jiang Tianyi was, Chen Lan was stunned and frowned as he considered it. "From what I know, Jiang Tianyi's forging skills can only be considered above average. His experience, skills, and maturity should be slightly weaker than mine. I can't possibly lose to him, but for him to be so confident, does he have something to rely on?" Thinking of this, Chen Lan became more cautious and asked Jiang Tianyi, "Where will we compete? When will we compete? Will you compete with me?" He had to ask clearly to avoid falling into Jiang Tianyi's trap. Jiang Tianyi explained patiently, "Tonight, in the Gold Laurel Palace, the winner will be decided by 2 out of 3 wins. All 3 of us can participate in the competition. Similarly, you and that old man can also participate." Chen Lan frowned again and sank into deep thought. 2 out of 3 wins? If that's the case, one person is indeed not enough. It's almost impossible to forge 3 weapons in a short amount of time. That kid Jiang Tianxing is too weak. Even if he participates in the competition, he will lose without a doubt and can be ignored. It seems that Jiang Tianyi and that white-robed youth will be the ones to compete. Thinking of this, Chen Lan stared closely at Ji Tianxing and muttered to himself, "This kid looks ordinary and doesn't look like a divine craftsman. What is Jiang Tianyi doing?" At this moment, the white-haired elder reminded him, "Young Master Lan, that kid is human and very unfamiliar. He doesn't look like a Jiang clan disciple." Chen Lan's eyes lit up. He pointed at Ji Tianxing and shouted at Jiang Tianyi, "Jiang Tianyi, who is that kid? How come I don't know that the Jiang clan has such a person? This is a matter between our sect and the Jiang clan. Why are you asking an outsider for help?" Jiang Tianyi was prepared. Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to reply, he took the initiative to answer, "This young master Tianxing joined the Jiang clan 1,000 years ago. He just hasn't shown himself. I can swear to the heavens that he is definitely a Jiang clan disciple." Jiang Tianyi thought to himself, "Young Master Tianxing is our clan's benefactor and the master of second uncle and third uncle. He should be considered a Jiang clan disciple, right?" Chen Lan couldn't refute this. He looked at Ji Tianxing a few more times but couldn't find any clues. He could only nod and agree. "All right, then we'll follow this rule." Jiang Tianyi raised his hand and said, "Wait, we still have to summon the 2 blacksmithing geniuses and let them watch the competition with their own eyes. Only in this way will they know what choice they should make." "All right." Chen Lan had the same idea, so she nodded and agreed without any hesitation. Then, Chen Lan and Jiang Tianxing took out jade slips and sent messages to Lin Zhen and Zhon Longxiang. Everyone waited for a few minutes before the 2 blacksmithing geniuses arrived one after another. Lin Zhen was dressed luxuriously and had greasy hair and a powdered face. He was the standard young master of an aristocratic family. Zhon Longxiang had a rough appearance and was dressed simply. He even wore the Daoist robes of Changle Dao College and a square crown on his head. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. After the 2 blacksmithing geniuses arrived, Chen Lan explained the situation to them and the meaning of the competition. Lin Zhen smiled and was full of anticipation, waiting to watch a good show. Zhon Longxiang was expressionless and said in a low voice, "Even if the 2 divine blacksmiths decide the winner, Lin Zhen and I will not join the same sect." Chen Lan was a little embarrassed and hurriedly explained, "It's okay. This competition is only to decide who will withdraw." Actually, he hated Zhon Longxiang. This fellow looked rough and had a very old-fashioned and dull personality. He was not as smart as Lin Zhen and was more likable. Chapter 3472. The rules had been set. Those who were supposed to be there had arrived. Hence, Chen Lan asked Uncle Yang to close the doors of the gold cassia palace. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Chen Lan waved his hand and shot out hundreds of divine lights into the ground. In an instant, several divine arrays were activated and enveloped the entire palace. In this way, no one would be disturbed while refining weapons in the palace. The first round would be between Jiang Tianyi and Chen Lan. Uncle Yang instructed Chen Lan. Chen Lan nodded to indicate that she understood. Only then did she step into the hall. Jiang Tianyi took a deep breath and calmed himself down before walking to the center of the palace. Jiang Tianxing quickly cheered him on and waved his fist. "Seventh brother, I believe you can do it." Jiang Tianyi turned around and smiled at him. Then, he looked at Ji Tianxing. Actually, what he cared about the most was Ji Tianxing's attitude. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing looked indifferent, as if he didn't take it to heart. Jiang Tianyi was a little depressed. He could only turn around and walk to the center of the palace. He and Chen Lan sat cross-legged 1,000 feet apart, one on the left and one on the right. In the first round, let's see who can refine a low-grade king-grade divine artifact faster. How about it? Chen Lan was the first to speak as he stared at Jiang Tianyi. His strength was similar to Jiang Tianyi's at the 6th level of the Divine King realm. However, he had cultivated for a long time and had reached the peak of the 6th level. He had refined at least 80 king-grade low-grade divine artifacts, if not 100. He was confident that he could beat Jiang Tianyi. Of course, Jiang Tianyi couldn't show his fear. He nodded without hesitation. All right. Then, the first round began. Both of them took out their cauldrons as fast as they could. Jiang Tianyi's bronze cauldron and Chen Lan's cauldron were both mid-grade king-grade artifacts. Both of them were outstanding middle-grade divine blacksmiths. The moment they took out their cauldrons, they immediately entered a state of full concentration. An invisible aura emanated from their bodies. Both of them forgot about their surroundings and immersed themselves in refining weapons. First, he cast the spell and activated the array formation in the cauldron. Once the divine flames in the cauldron rose and the temperature was suitable, he added the refining materials. Their movements were extremely orderly, extremely skilled, precise, and without the slightest hesitation. Even the materials used by the two of them were the same, 9 sets. Furthermore, the divine weapons they were going to refine were the same. They were both divine swords. There was no other way. Most of the king-grade divine artifacts they refined were weapons. Among the weapons, swords were the most common. Seeing the chemistry between Chen Lan and Jiang Tianyi, as well as their skill and speed in smithing, the crowd's interest was piqued. Uncle Yang stood in the upper left corner of the hall, his eyes fixed on Chen Lan. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianxing sat on the right side of the hall. Lin Zhen and Zhong Longxiang sat near the entrance of the main hall, separated by a few hundred feet. Even though they didn't get along. But at this moment, both of them had neglected each other. They all stared at Chen Lan and Jiang Tianyi with rapt attention. They carefully watched the artifact forging, afraid that they would miss any detail. The main hall was silent, and the atmosphere was solemn. But Ji Tianxing's reaction was calm. He didn't pay attention to the two divine blacksmiths and wasn't as nervous as Jiang Tianxing. No one knew. Actually, he already had an answer in his heart and predicted the outcome. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, 20 hours had passed in the main hall. At this time, it was just midnight outside the main hall. Only 4 hours had passed. Without a doubt, the divine formation that enveloped the main hall had a time array formation that sped up time by 5 times. Ji Tianxing noticed this and felt slightly comforted. Fortunately, there's time acceleration. Otherwise, waiting for so long would be too boring. As for Uncle Yang, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, and Zhong Longxiang, they couldn't feel the passage of time at all. All their attention was on Jiang Tianyi and Chen Lan, and their hearts were in their throats. At this time, Chen Lan and Jiang Tianyi had finished forging the sword embryos and were beginning to inscribe the laws and restriction runes on them. From the looks of it, the two of them were equally matched in terms of speed. But the most crucial moment had arrived. The speed, accuracy, and success rate of inscribing laws and restriction runes were the criteria that determined a divine blacksmith skill. Jiang Tianxing and Uncle Yang's expressions became even more solemn. Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang were even more engrossed as they analyzed and guessed in their hearts. These two divine blacksmiths seemed to be equally skilled. I wonder who will win. Currently, it seems that the divine blacksmith of the Jiang clan has a more stable and reserved personality. He should be easier to get along with. If I enter the Jiang clan, he should take care of me, right? Although divine blacksmith Chen Lan of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect is arrogant, he's the easiest to serve. I only need to put in some effort to win his favor. Hopefully, divine blacksmith Chen Lan will win. Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang each had their own thoughts. Unknowingly, another 6 days passed. Chen Lan and Jiang Tianyi's forging was nearing the end. Their swords were layered with more than 90 laws and restrictions and more than 900 types of laws and restrictions. Only now did the gap between their forging speed widen slightly. When Chen Lan finished inscribing the 97th law rune, Jiang Tianyi had only finished the 96th law rune and was still inscribing restrictions and restrictions. Such a small difference naturally couldn't escape the eyes of Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianxing, and Uncle Yang. Ji Tianxing's expression was still calm. Jiang Tianxing's expression became more solemn and anxious. Uncle Yang, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief and had a gratified smile on his face. As long as there were no accidents, the outcome was set. However, Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang couldn't see what was going on inside the cauldron and didn't know the difference between the two divine blacksmiths. An hour passed, 2 hours passed. Finally, another hour and a half passed. Chen Lan had successfully inscribed 100 laws and 1,000 restrictions. He was the first to complete the low-grade king-grade divine sword. Phew! Chen Lan stopped and let out a long breath. He used his sleeve to wipe away the sweat on his forehead. He raised his head and looked at Jiang Tianyi. Seeing that Jiang Tianyi wasn't done yet, he smiled smugly. Ha 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 ha. Jiang Tianyi, oh Jiang Tianyi, I thought you were very capable. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant with just this little bit of skill. Chen Lan laughed smugly and mocked Jiang Tianyi mercilessly. Jiang Tianyi was already very anxious, and when he heard Chen Lan's cold laughter, he became even more anxious and his expression turned ugly. However, he wasn't distracted by Chen Lan. He pursed his lips and continued with the finishing touches. Although he had already lost, he couldn't give up halfway. He still had to complete the forging. Moreover, he still had a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the divine sword he forged would be more successful and perfect than Chen Lan's. Jiang Tianxing was also dejected. His eyes were filled with disappointment as he muttered to himself, "How can this be? Seventh brother's skill in forging is in the top 3 among us 9 brothers. Wonderful book house." Chapter 3473. Jiang Tianxing could not accept this result. He even thought that losing to Chen Lan meant that he could only withdraw from the competition for the blacksmithing genius. I can't accept this. I was the one who found these 2 blacksmithing geniuses first. Jiang Tianxing roared in his heart. He clenched his fists so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands popped out. On the other side, Uncle Yang puffed out his chest with a proud smile on his face. Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang had different expressions. Zhong Longxiang frowned, clearly surprised and disappointed. However, Lin Zhan raised his brows, his eyes filled with anticipation and joy. Chen Lan was not in a hurry to open the cauldron lid. He continued to mock Jiang Tianyi and harassed him with words to buy time. Fortunately, Jiang Tianyi had strong willpower and turned a deaf ear to his words. After another quarter of an hour, Jiang Tianyi finally completed the forging of the divine sword. When he stopped, Chen Lan sneered contemptuously, "You've already lost, and you're still putting on airs." Jiang Tianyi said expressionlessly, "As a blacksmith and a divine blacksmith, the most basic requirement is to never give up on a piece of work easily. This is a form of respect for the materials and oneself. A loss is a loss. Why are you still so stubborn?" Chen Lan pursed his lips in disdain and sneered. "You were 15 minutes slower than me. That's enough to see the difference in strength." Jiang Tianyi did not bicker with him. He said coldly, "You can't make a conclusion without seeing the divine sword. All right, I'll make you give up then." Chen Lan smiled disdainfully and opened the cauldron lid. Swoosh! A golden arc flew out of the cauldron and lit up with a dazzling golden light. It was like the sun hanging in the sky, illuminating the entire hall. Everyone's eyes were focused on the golden arc. They saw a golden divine sword about 3 feet long and 2 inches wide floating in the air. The sword was dignified and holy. It looked like a swimming dragon, and the sword light was dense and hazy. It was definitely the best among the low-grade king-level divine weapons. Uncle Yang was the first to clap and cheer. Young Master Lan is extremely talented and his blacksmithing skills have reached perfection. This sword is of the best quality. Lin Zhen also cheered and said excitedly, "Good sword. What a peerless sword." Although the battle dragon-esque elephant did not say anything, its eyes were burning. It was obvious that it approved and was excited. Chen Lan laughed heartily. "Ha ha ha ha. Jiang Tianyi, did you see that clearly? Learn from him. However, I feel that you won't be able to learn it at all." Jiang Tiansheng curled his lips angrily and said, "What are you so proud of? Seventh brother's divine weapon hasn't shown up yet." As his voice fell, Jiang Tianyi waved his hand and opened the lid. Swish! A streak of scarlet light soared into the sky, bringing with it a fearful sword radiance. It was like a bloody sun in the sky, illuminating the entire hall red. Within the blood-red light was a broadsword that was about 5 feet long and as wide as a palm. It was emitting a heavy and sacred pressure. This sword wasn't as dignified and divine as Chen Lan's golden sword. It was more like a sword of slaughter that could split the heavens and the earth apart. It was filled with an iron-blooded domineering aura and a might that looked down upon all living beings. If Chen Lan's work was described as a monarch's sword, then Jiang Tianyi's divine sword would be an overlord's sword. Without a doubt, this sword was also a top-grade low-grade king-grade god artifact. Jiang Tiansheng was the first to applaud. He shouted, "Did you see that? Seventh brother's divine sword is even more powerful and domineering than yours. Your sword is a woman's sword. Seventh brother's bloody slaughter divine sword is a real man's weapon." Chen Lan's expression didn't look too good as he glared at Jiang Tiansheng. Uncle Yang was silent and didn't comment. He was also someone who knew his stuff. Of course, he knew that both swords were top grade. It was hard to tell which was better. Lin Zhen frowned and didn't say anything. He had to admit that the bloody slaughter divine sword was very impressive. On the other hand, Zhong Longxiang's face was filled with excitement and admiration. His face was flushed red. He didn't say anything, but he was screaming in his heart, "What a peerless divine weapon. This is the sword that I've been dreaming of." The hall fell into a short period of silence. Chen Lan frowned and said, "Jiang Tianyi, everyone's eyes are clear. I'll be fair and objective and say that the bloody slaughter divine sword you refined is also a top-grade weapon. In terms of divine sword quality, you and I are tied. However, you were 15 minutes slower than me. That's the truth. Therefore, you still lost." Jiang Tianyi couldn't refute and could only silently put away the bloody slaughter divine sword and divine furnace. But Jiang Tiansheng was very unconvinced. He still wanted to quibble but didn't know what to say. The first round ended just like that. Chen Lan looked askance at Jiang Tianyi and said with a cold smile, "How is it? You're not convinced of your loss, right? Want another round? Anyway, it's decided in 3 rounds. You still have 2 chances." Chen Lan was very cunning. Although he had just refined an artifact and used up a lot of divine power, if they continued to compete, his speed would definitely decrease several times. However, Jiang Tianyi was the same as him. His strength and foundation were inferior to his, and his speed would be even slower. If they continued to compete in the second round, Jiang Tianyi would still lose to him. And he would lose even more miserably. Best of 3. If Jiang Tianyi lost 2 rounds in a row, he could scram with his tail between his legs. Everyone present understood Chen Lan's intentions. Jiang Tianyi naturally wasn't willing to take the bait. He said with a cold smile, "You'd better save it. Also, best of 3. You've only won 1 round. Don't be smug too early. Then, he ignored Chen Lan's mockery and walked toward Jiang Tianxing and Ji Tianxing. Everyone thought that he would meditate for a while before competing with Chen Lan. However, to everyone's surprise, he walked straight to Ji Tianxing and bowed respectfully with a sincere expression. Young Master Tianxing, I can only rely on you. Jiang Tianyi bowed very low with a sincere expression. Chen Lan, Uncle Yang, Lin Zhan, and Zhon Longxiang all looked at Ji Tianxing. Jiang Tianxing was also surprised. He pulled Jiang Tianyi's sleeve and asked, "Seventh brother, you're not going to compete? You're letting him compete in your place? Can he do it?" Jiang Tianyi ignored him and maintained his bow. Ji Tianxing frowned slightly. He looked at Jiang Tianyi and asked, "Are you sure you want me to compete? Are you not going to compete?" Jiang Tianyi replied in a low and depressed tone, "I'm indeed not his match. After all, I'm 3,000 years younger than him and my cultivation is not as profound as his. Now, only you can secure the victory and force Chen Lan to withdraw. Otherwise, the two blacksmithing geniuses will be taken away by the 100 smelting ancient sect. The Jiang clan will lose face." Ji Tianxing was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "All right, I'll help you one more time for your sake. Get up." Jiang Tianyi stood up with a gratified smile. He said solemnly, "Thank you for your help, young master. I will never forget it." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and didn't say anything. He stood up and walked to the center of the hall. At this moment, Chen Lan frowned and asked coldly, "Kid, who are you?" Uncle Yang also said expressionlessly, "An outsider has no right to interfere with the battle between our sect and the Jiang clan. Young man, if you don't reveal your identity, don't blame me for throwing you out of the Gold Laurel Palace." Chapter 3474. Previously, Chen Lan and Uncle Yang had suspected Ji Tianxing's identity. However, he kept a low profile and did not attract any attention. Hence, the two of them did not pay much attention to him. However, it was different now. Jiang Tianyi had lost the first round, but he wanted to invite Ji Tianxing to participate in the second round. Moreover, Jiang Tianyi was very respectful towards Ji Tianxing, as if he was facing an elder. However, there was no such young human among the elders, protectors, and leaders of the Jiang clan. How could Chen Lan and Uncle Yang not be suspicious? Faced with the two's questioning, Jiang Tianyi frowned and hesitated whether to reveal Ji Tianxing's true identity. At this moment, Ji Tianxing looked at Uncle Yang with a smile and mocked, "Yang Shangao, it's been 1,000 years and you haven't improved at all. Oh right, is your illegitimate son still alive? Don't tell me you've decided to kill him for justice." He paused for a while and muttered to himself, "However, with your character, you'll probably kill your illegitimate son to protect yourself. After all, your wife is a direct descendant of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. If you want to hug the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's thigh, you have to show your determination." Upon hearing this, Uncle Yang, who was still domineering just a moment ago, froze. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. His expression was extremely ugly. His eyes were wide open as he stared fixedly at Ji Tianxing. His eyes were filled with fear. "You! Who are you? Don't slander me and tarnish my reputation." Uncle Yang was shocked, but he still maintained his rationality and quickly denied it. However, his reaction had already betrayed him. Everyone knew that Ji Tianxing was right. Even Chen Lan was stunned. She looked at Uncle Yang with a strange look in her eyes. Seeing Chen Lan's reaction, Ji Tianxing ignored Uncle Yang and said to Chen Lan, "Second brother Chen, it seems like you don't know Yang Shangao well. This old man used to be the guard commander of the treasury and was a person of high status. However, 1,000 years ago, the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect suddenly announced that he would be stripped of his position and demoted to your housekeeper and guard. Don't you understand what's going on? Maybe you're still feeling complacent and think that the sect thinks highly of you, so you did it on purpose, right?" Chen Lan was at a loss for words. She wanted to retort, but she couldn't. Uncle Yang's expression turned even uglier. His eyes were as sharp as swords as he glared at Ji Tianxing. In a low voice, he asked, "Boy, who are you?" Ji Tianxing smiled contemptuously and said in an indifferent tone, "Yang Shangao, not to mention you, Even if your sect leader Shu Bai Lian was here, he wouldn't dare to be impudent in front of this king. There are 800 outer disciples, 200 inner disciples, 9 elite disciples, 12 elders, the left and right protectors, the sect leader, and the vice-sect leader. I know all of them like the back of my hand. Can you guess who this prince is? In terms of seniority, both of you should address this prince as Old Master. Chen Lan and Uncle Yang were dumbfounded. They stared at him with their mouths agape. Their first reaction was disbelief. Not only was this human young man young, but he was also a nobody. How could he have such a high seniority? Chen Lan and Uncle Yang were furious. They felt that the other party was bluffing and even humiliating them. However, both of them suppressed their anger and didn't dare to be impudent. After all, Ji Tianxing's tone was calm and confident. It was as if he was telling the truth. He wasn't pretending. Moreover, he knew the situation of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect very well. His words were clear and logical. He even dared to call the sect leader of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect by his name. In an instant, Chen Lan and Uncle Yang were stunned. They couldn't tell if it was true or false. The two of them looked at each other and discussed secretly through voice transmission. Uncle Yang, can you guess who this boy is? Is there such a human young man among the seniors who have dealings with our sect? Chen Lan, don't be fooled by him. This boy is so young. How can he be a senior? Uncle Yang, to us divine king powerhouses, maintaining a youthful appearance isn't anything difficult. Moreover, there are many old monsters who have lived for tens of thousands of years who like to disguise themselves as handsome young men. This guy doesn't look like he's lying. If he really is a senior, won't we offend him? Chen Lan was obviously stunned and didn't dare to act rashly. However, Uncle Yang shook his head secretly and objected. I feel that the probability of this is not high. What if he's pretending and we're still fooled? Won't that be embarrassing? Chen Lan frowned and said in a low voice, Uncle Yang, he knows the situation of our sect like the back of his hand. Also, what he said about you just now, is it true? Uncle Yang's expression was very awkward. He turned his head and said, Young Master Lan, can we not talk about this? Chen Lan spread out his hands and said, Then it's true. Since that's the case, we'd rather believe it's true than not. Anyway, we're only competing with him in weapon refinement. We won't fight to the death. No matter if he's real or fake, we won't lose anything if we don't harp on this question. Uncle Yang remained silent, which was a tacit agreement. At this time, Ji Tianxing looked at Chen Lan with a smile that didn't look like a smile. He asked, Are the two of you done muttering? Who still has objections to my identity? Uncle Yang remained silent and glared at him angrily. Chen Lan wanted to ask who Ji Tianxing was, but Ji Tianxing's words made his body tense up and his hair stand on end. 1125 years ago, 3 disciples of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect entered the mysterious nether cave to explore. You were one of them, right? 2 of them died, and only you came out alive. Have you found out the cause of their deaths? Although Ji Tianxing seemed to be asking casually, a cold smile appeared on his face. However, there was a cold smile on his lips as he stared at Chen Lan with a meaningful look in his eyes. That deep and cold gaze seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Chen Lan's heart clenched and cold sweat broke out on his back. Even his expression was a little stiff. Others didn't know the truth, but he was well aware. He was the one who caused the death of one of the disciples. In order to cover up the truth, he killed the other disciple. After escaping the mysterious nether cave, he lied that the 2 disciples were attacked by ferocious beasts and that he had risked his life to escape. The 100 Refinement Ancient sect investigated for a period of time, but nothing was found. Everyone had forgotten about this matter, and Chen Lan had also thrown it to the back of his mind. Now that Ji Tianxing mentioned it, it seemed like he was reminding him of something. Chen Lan immediately became vigilant and fearful. He was afraid that he would expose himself, so he quickly smiled and said, Young Master Tianxing, you must be joking. The sect has already investigated this matter. Ji Tianxing didn't pursue the matter. He smiled and said, Can we start the second round now? Chen Lan secretly sighed in relief and quickly nodded. Yes. Of course. Ji Tianxing looked at him from the corner of his eyes and sneered. You seem to be very guilty. Could it be that paper can't wrap fire and you've exposed yourself? Chen Lan's nerves, which had just relaxed, instantly tensed up again. Her heart thumped. When he saw Uncle Yang's doubtful and scrutinizing gaze, his mind went blank. He stopped breathing and his limbs turned cold. Chapter 3475. At that moment, Chen Lan was truly scared out of his wits. The rules of the 100 Refinements ancient sect were very strict. Once the sect found out that he had harmed a fellow disciple, only death awaited him. Furthermore, the disciples of the sect could expose each other. For example, if Uncle Yang exposed this matter to the sect, he would be rewarded greatly. Perhaps his punishment would be revoked, and he would be able to return to guard the treasury and be the leader of the guards. That was why Chen Lan was so terrified. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and smiled. I was just joking with you. Look at how scared you are. Only then did Chen Lan feel as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Her suspended heart finally settled back into her stomach, and her soul that had flown out of the heavens returned to her body. He forced an ugly smile on his pale face and said in a hoarse voice, Young Master Tianxing, you can't joke about this. It'll kill someone. Uncle Yang retracted his suspicious gaze and remained silent. Ji Tianxing sat down cross-legged and took out the 9 heavens cauldron. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's start the competition. Which one of you will fight? Chen Lan secretly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and pointed at Uncle Yang. He will fight. I need to rest for a few days. He will fight this round. Uncle Yang was prepared for this, so he wasn't surprised. However, he frowned and looked at Chen Lan. Young Master Lan, I'm not a direct disciple of the sect. My skills in refining weapons are very ordinary. I can't compare to you. This guy's background is mysterious, so his skills must be extraordinary. His skills in refining weapons must be superb. If I fight him, I'll most likely lose. Chen Lan didn't panic and replied calmly, Uncle Yang, don't worry. This is just a temporary measure. Don't forget, we'll win 2 out of 3 rounds. I've already won 1 round, so it's fine even if you lose to him. In the 3rd round, it'll still be me versus Jiang Tianyi. They'll definitely lose. Uncle Yang was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He nodded in agreement. That's right. This guy needs to rest after the competition. Jiang Tianyi will fight the 3rd round. Thinking of this, he calmed down and no longer felt pressured. All right, I'll fight you in the 2nd round. Uncle Yang regained his dignified aura and walked to the center of the hall. He was 100 meters away from Ji Tianxing. He took out a king-level divine cauldron and sat cross-legged on the ground. Young Master Tianxing, you think too highly of yourself. You even consider yourself our senior. Then this old man would like to see if your attainments and strength in refining artifacts are as big as your word. Ji Tianxing looked at him with a smile and said lightly, You're just cannon fodder. Don't give yourself more drama. Uncle Yang's face turned red, but he couldn't say a single word of rebuttal. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing both held their stomachs and laughed out loud. Even Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang smiled. The atmosphere in the main hall was finally not so oppressive anymore. Soon, the competition between Ji Tianxing and Uncle Yang began. The two of them activated the array formation in the divine cauldron and began to adjust the divine flames and the temperature in the cauldron to prepare for the refinement. An hour later, the preparations were complete. The two of them took out the materials and added them into the cauldron. The competition was still about refining a king-level low-grade divine artifact. Uncle Yang took out 10 sets of materials to refine a divine sword. Ji Tianxing took out 8 sets of materials to refine a divine armor. Chen Lan, Jiang Tianxing, and the others were shocked when they saw the materials used by the two of them. They were filled with doubt. That's a king-level low-grade divine artifact. He needs at least 9 sets of materials to succeed. He only used 8 sets. Even Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang looked at Ji Tianxing in a different light. They were looking forward to it. He wants to refine a king-level divine artifact with only 8 sets of materials. It seems like this Tianxing has a special refining technique that's better than Chenlan and Jiang Tianyi's. Out of everyone present, only Jiang Tianyi had a smile on his face. He was already used to it. After that, Ji Tianxing and Uncle Yang both focused on casting their spells and forging tools. Uncle Yang gave it his all. He was especially serious and focused. His nerves were tense. Although he was cannon fodder, Chen Lan expected him to lose. But he wanted to prove himself and give it his all. If he beat Ji Tianxing, not only would he be proud, but he would also win the competition and force the Jiang clan out of the competition. Then he would have made a contribution. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing's expression was calm and indifferent. There was a sense of leisure in his concentration. It was as if he wasn't refining artifacts, completing a mission, or competing with others. It was as if he was drinking tea, admiring the moon, and appreciating paintings. His mental state was relaxed. But his hand movements were as smooth as flowing water. It was too fast for the eyes to take in, and it was accurate. He used different methods in the early, middle, and late stages of refining the divine armor. They were all refining techniques that no one had ever heard of before. They were mysterious and profound. Chen Lan, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhan, and Zhong Longxiang stared at him. Their eyes were filled with amazement and admiration. Especially Zhong Longxiang. His eyes were burning, and his heart was filled with adoration. Time passed quickly, and no one noticed. Unknowingly, 7 days had passed. Ji Tianxing finally finished his refinement and stopped his work. His expression was still calm, and there wasn't even a bead of sweat on his forehead. He looked especially relaxed. After he finished refining, he didn't say anything. He just sat on the spot and closed his eyes, waiting silently. The 9th heaven cauldron that was spinning quickly also stopped. It floated motionlessly. Seeing him do that, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhan, and Zhong Longxiang all looked at Chen Lan. Chen Lan was embarrassed. He was too ashamed to show his face. After all, he was very proud of himself after refining the artifact. He even mocked and harassed Jiang Tianyi. Compared to Ji Tianxing's actions, he was a despicable person. Ji Tianxing had the demeanor of a grandmaster and the bearing of a divine blacksmith. Embarrassed by everyone's gazes, Chen Lan could only change the topic. He pursed his lips and said, "So what if his refining techniques are fancy? Didn't he use 7 days just like me? Even if he were to compete with me, we would only be able to tie." No one said anything. They couldn't refute him. After that, the crowd waited for another 12 hours before Uncle Yang finally completed the refinement. Phew, after he stopped, Uncle Yang let out a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve. His face was a little pale, and he looked a little tired. He said to Chen Lan, "Young Master Lan, I didn't let you down. I've finished refining." Chen Lan forced a smile. "Uncle Yang, you've worked hard. However, young Master Tianxing finished refining 12 hours ago." "Ah!" Uncle Yang was stunned. He said dejectedly, "I didn't expect that I would still lose after giving it my all." Chen Lan hurriedly comforted him. "Don't worry. Let's wait until everyone sees your work. Perhaps your artifact will be more exquisite than his." Uncle Yang nodded and opened the cauldron lid. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 3476. Swoosh. The lid of the cauldron opened, and a white rainbow flew into the air. A 4-foot-long sword was wrapped in the dazzling white rainbow. The sword was blazing white and had a dignified appearance. It rippled with a vigorous divine power aura. It contained 100 types of divine Tao laws and 1,000 types of divine formations and restrictions. Compared to Chen Lan and Jiang Tianyi's works, this sword could only be considered average and not outstanding. Chen Lan was a little disappointed. He had already guessed the outcome. However, he still had a trace of hope. He looked at Ji Tianxing and said, "Young Master Tianxing, it's your turn." Ji Tianxing did not waste any time. He waved his hand and opened the lid of the 9 heavens cauldron. Swoosh! A dazzling icy blue divine light bloomed from the cauldron and slowly rose into the air. The entire hall was illuminated with an icy blue color. It was like a palace of ice and snow. Following the appearance of an exquisite and gorgeous divine armor, the entire hall turned into a hall of extreme cold. Frost formed everywhere. Everyone ignored the bone-piercing cold. They stared at the icy blue armor and observed it carefully. This divine armor is too beautiful. This should be, for a woman to wear, right? Jiang Tianxing exclaimed from the bottom of his heart. It's so exquisite and gorgeous. The patterns on the armor are also original. It's really admirable. Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang were excited. Their expressions were filled with admiration and worship. Even Chen Lan had to admit that this divine armor was indeed a divine item. It was a 1 in a 1,000 masterpiece. Jiang Tianyi observed it carefully for a while before saying, "It's really a low-grade king-grade divine artifact. And it's a supreme grade one. Whether it's the difficulty of refining or the quality, it far surpasses the bloody slaughter sword that I refined and the sword that Chen Lan refined." Jiang Tianyi was sincerely impressed. However, before he could finish, Chen Lan said indignantly, "I don't deny that it surpasses your bloody slaughter sword. However, it surpasses my divine sword." "Are you sure?" Jiang Tianyi turned to look at him and nodded expressionlessly. "I'm very sure. First of all, refining an armor is more complicated and time-consuming than a divine sword. Secondly, young Master Tianxing only used 8 sets of materials. You used 9 sets. This is enough to prove that young Master Tianxing's attainments in refining artifacts are superior to yours. Most importantly, take a closer look at this divine armor. How many laws and restrictions does it contain?" Chen Lan was stunned. She looked at the ice-blue divine armor again and observed it carefully. After a short moment, his figure shook while his expression stiffened, and he couldn't help but exclaim with shock. 130 divine crests of the laws. More than 1,300 restrictions. Oh my God. It's only been 7 days, how could he? Chen Lan was completely dumbfounded. He was so shocked that his blood was boiling and his entire body was burning. At this moment, winning or losing was no longer important. He just wanted to know how Ji Tianxing did it. Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang were also stunned. They looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes full of respect and admiration. The hall fell into silence. Uncle Yang put away the divine cauldron and divine sword. He broke the silence and said in a low voice, "We have lost the second round." His words woke everyone up. Only then did Chen Lan come back to his senses. He regained his confidence and composure and grinned. "Haha, even if young Master Tianxing won, it's nothing. It's all within my expectations anyway. Now that we are tied, we have to wait for the 3rd round to determine the winner." With that said, Chen Lan looked at Jiang Tianyi provocatively and curled his finger. "Jiang Tianyi, my divine power and condition have both recovered to their peak. You can admit defeat in advance." Jiang Tianyi immediately frowned, and his expression became serious. "That's right. So what if Ji Tianxing won the 1st round? He still had to go up for the 3rd round and have a final battle with Chen Lan. He had only recovered 90% and was not at his peak condition. It was very, very difficult to win against Chen Lan." Jiang Tianyi was originally very happy, but when he thought of this problem, he became depressed. Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang also looked at Jiang Tianyi, waiting for him to make a decision. Should he compete with Chen Lan and lose? Or should he save his energy and time and admit defeat directly? Just as everyone was waiting for Jiang Tianyi to make a decision, a calm voice sounded. "The 3rd round will still be mine." Everyone was stunned for a moment and turned their heads. Without a doubt, the person who spoke was Ji Tianxing. Jiang Tianyi both frowned and asked worriedly, "Young Master Tianxing, aren't you going to rest for a few days?" Although the two of them said the same thing, their thoughts were different. Jiang Tianyi was worried that Ji Tianxing's continuous forging of divine weapons would damage his foundation of the divine path. Jiang Tianyi, on the other hand, was worried that Ji Tianxing would lose to Chen Lan due to his lack of strength in the 3rd round. Chen Lan raised his eyebrows and asked with a playful smile, "Young Master Tianxing, your forging skills are indeed extraordinary. However, you have just finished forging a divine weapon. Are you sure you want to continue? Don't say that I took advantage of you by not letting you rest and recuperate. You asked for it yourself. Clearly, Chen Lan was not worried about losing at all. If Jiang Tianyi participated in the third round, he would definitely lose. If Ji Tianxing continued, he would not have much chance of winning in a situation where he did not have enough divine power and was mentally exhausted. No matter what, Chen Lan was sure to win. Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said indifferently, "It's only been 7 days. I didn't use much divine power. Do I still need to rest and recuperate?" Chen Lan choked on her words and said in exasperation, "Fine. Since you are so confident, let's wait and see." Jiang Tianyi wanted to persuade Ji Tianxing but was stopped by Jiang Tianyi. He transmitted his voice to Jiang Tianyi, "Ninth brother, young Master Tianxing's strength and methods are far beyond our imagination. Since he is so confident, we will definitely win." Jiang Tianyi was skeptical. After hesitating for a long time, he finally acquiesced. On the other side, Uncle Yang reminded Chen Lan, "Young Master Lan, that kid's forging skills are so shocking. You must not let your guard down." Chen Lan nodded to show that he understood and said with a smile, "If I had competed with him just now, I would definitely have lost. His forging skills are indeed brilliant. However, he has just finished forging a divine weapon. His divine power must be empty and his mind exhausted. I, on the other hand, am in peak condition. Why should I be afraid of losing to him?" Uncle Yang was speechless. He could only remind him, "In any case, young Master Lan, you must give it your all." "All right, I understand." Chen Lan waved his hand and walked to the main hall to sit down. He took out the divine cauldron and looked at Ji Tianxing opposite him. "Shall we begin?" Ji Tianxing raised his hand and said, "Wait. This third round will determine the winner. If we compete like this, it will be too monotonous." Chen Lan frowned. "What? You know that your divine power is insufficient and want to change the rules?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "It's boring to just forge a low-grade king-level divine weapon. Why don't we upgrade the divine weapon we just forged to mid-grade?" "Upgrade a low-grade divine weapon?" Chen Lan frowned and pondered seriously. After weighing the pros and cons, he gritted his teeth and made a decision. "Fine." Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Why don't we add some stakes? Otherwise, it will be boring for everyone to watch." Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3477. Ji Tianxing's words made Chen Lan fall silent. Uncle Yang was filled with anxiety. He hurriedly sent a voice transmission to remind him. "Young Master Lan, be careful of that guy's tricks. Both are low-grade king-grade divine artifacts, but the divine armor he made has 30 more runes than your divine sword. If the two of you compete like this, he can save nearly a day of time compared to you. Moreover, you haven't made many mid-grade king-grade divine artifacts. I'm afraid you don't have enough experience." Before Uncle Yang could finish, Chen Lan waved his hand and interrupted him. "Uncle Yang, not only have I helped my master and a few elders to make mid-grade king-grade divine artifacts 7 times, but I've also made them 3 times. And all of them were successful. If we're talking about experience, I'm quite confident. However, his divine armor has 130 runes, so it can save a lot of time." Seeing that he had listened to his advice, Uncle Yang didn't say anything else. Chen Lan looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, "What do you want to bet with me?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Of course I want to bet some valuables, such as precious treasures or divine artifacts." "Do you dare?" Chen Lan sneered and said, "Why wouldn't I dare? Tell me, what treasures do you want to bet?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Your master is the left protector of the 100 Refinements ancient sect. I remember that he found a great opportunity on a star when he was exploring the universe. He dug up a huge piece of primordial jade essence, which is a treasure that has been growing for 100,000 years. Not only can it be used to heal injuries, forge weapons, and refine pills, but it can also be refined to increase one's strength. He seems to have divided the primordial jade essence into a few portions. He gave one to the 100 Refinements ancient sect, refined one for himself, and kept a few for himself. If I'm not wrong, you're the disciple he's most proud of, so he should have given you a portion, right?" Hearing this, Chen Lan was instantly on guard, and his eyes were filled with caution. How do you know all this? You're actually thinking about Master's primordial jade essence. Chen Lan exclaimed. This matter was extremely secretive. Even within the 100 Refinements ancient sect, not many people knew about it. 200 years ago, Chen Lan had made a great contribution and brought glory to his master. That was why his master had secretly rewarded him with a primordial jade marrow. From then on, he learned of the origin and effects of the primordial chalcedony. It grew in the depths of the earth's core. Even though it was nurtured within a divine jade mine, it was like fine nectar that could be directly consumed and refined. After obtaining the primordial chalcedony, Chen Lan had wanted to refine it to increase her cultivation. However, the left protector had repeatedly warned him that he had to wait until he reached the peak of the 6th degree realm and break through the shackles of the high-level divine king before using it. This way, he would have even greater hopes of becoming a high divine king. That was why Chen Lan had kept the primordial jade quintessence all this while and had not refined it yet. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianxing would actually guess that he had this item and even wanted to use it as a wager. Without any hesitation, Chen Lan rejected him decisively. No. I will never use it as a wager. Don't even think about it. With regards to his reaction, Ji Tianxing was not surprised at all. He merely smiled and said, "Why? The competition hasn't even started and you already think that you will lose. If that's the case, you might as well admit defeat and leave Chang'e City." "How can I admit defeat?" Of course, Chen Lan was not convinced, but he would not be provoked. "However, I will not use the primordial chalcedony as a wager. You can give up now." "Haha, is that so?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Since you want to bet, of course it has to be fair. My wager is as valuable as the primordial chalcedony. Don't you want to know what it is? What else can be as valuable as the primordial chalcedony?" Chen Lan naturally did not believe him. He frowned and stared at Ji Tianxing. Uncle Yang also revealed a curious and doubtful expression as he waited for Ji Tianxing's reply. Ji Tianxing looked at the two of them and said with a playful smile, "The 100 Smelting Ancient Sect was founded more than 37,000 years ago by a peerless divine blacksmith, Lian Qianqiu. At that time, Lian Qianqiu was only obsessed with researching and crafting divine weapons. He did not have time to care about worldly affairs. In order to craft a peerless divine weapon, he spent thousands of years of effort and traveled across the universe. He searched every corner of the divine world and almost died. He was a true blacksmithing maniac and a lunatic for researching divine weapons. Fortunately, he had 4 successful disciples who used his name to create the 100 Smelting Ancient Sect. After 3,000 years of development, the sect occupied a paradise and transcended the worldly affairs. It was with the power of the sect that Lian Qianqiu was able to gather the 2 sets of materials that he desperately needed. In the end, he successfully crafted a king-grade divine weapon, the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. Uncle Yang and Chen Lan were not unfamiliar with the legend of the 100 Smelting Ancient Sect's founding ancestor. However, after listening to Ji Tianxing's story, the two of them were not annoyed. Instead, they were filled with pride. However, when they heard the words 100 Smelting Divine Hammer, their expressions turned cold and their eyes dimmed. Ji Tianxing continued, "Although Lian Qianqiu did not change his ways of being a blacksmith maniac and went to the universe to search for special materials, unfortunately, he died in a black hole. However, the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer is indeed a peerless divine weapon. It has protected the 100 Smelting Ancient Sect for more than 30,000 years. It's a pity that the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer was destroyed during the War of the Gods 1,000 years ago. It turned into dust and scattered in the void. Until now, the 100 Smelting Ancient Sect has not been able to craft a similar divine hammer. This should be the 100 Smelting Ancient Sect's greatest wish, right?" Chen Lan and Uncle Yang both furrowed their brows and nodded with solemn and serious expressions. "You're right. This is indeed our sect's greatest regret. What are you trying to say? Don't tell us that you can craft 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. That would be a joke." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "Although I can craft 100 Smelting Divine Hammer, I don't have the time to spend thousands of years searching for materials. Uncle Yang and Chen Lan could tell that something was amiss. Their expressions changed and their hearts jumped to their throats. What do you mean? You can craft 100 smelting divine hammer? That's impossible. Ji Tianxing said calmly, if I'm not wrong, the 100 smelting ancient sect has prepared all the materials to craft a divine hammer. Unfortunately, the only thing you lack is the blueprint of the divine hammer. The 100 smelting divine hammer is extremely complicated and exquisite. None of you can see through it and no one can remember it. Naturally, you won't be able to craft it. After saying that, Ji Tianxing circulated his divine force and a ball of golden light the size of an egg flew out from his forehead. The dense golden light contained a vast amount of information. It was mysterious and profound. Ji Tianxing held the golden light in his hand and looked at Chen Lan with a smile. He said, coincidentally, I know the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer. Chen Lan, which one is more precious, the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer or your primordial jade essence? Hearing this, Chen Lan was so excited that his blood boiled. He stared at the golden light with a burning gaze and could not help but swallow his saliva. Is there a need to ask? Even 10 primordial jade essences cannot compare to the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer. Chapter 3478. Chen Lan was exaggerating. However, this was also within reason. To the 100 refinement ancient sect, the primordial jade marrow was just a precious treasure. However, the 100 refinement divine hammer was different. It was the totem of the 100 refinement ancient sect, the divine weapon of the sect. It was the pride and reliance of all the disciples of the 100 refinement ancient sect. Ji Tianxing's words made Chen Lan's blood boil. He was filled with excitement and anticipation. He wanted to take out the primordial jade marrow and exchange it for the blueprint of the divine hammer in Ji Tianxing's hands. However, that was impossible. Uncle Yang was also excited, but he was able to maintain his calm. Wait! He suddenly shouted coldly, interrupting Chen Lan's fantasy. Young Master Tianxing, no one in the sect knows about the structure of the 100 refinement divine hammer. How could an outsider like you know about it? Also, who can prove that the blueprint in your hands is real? Chen Lan finally snapped out of his daze. He quickly nodded and asked, that's right. You can't just take out something and lie to me that it's the blueprint of the 100 refinement divine hammer. You're taking this too lightly. Ji Tianxing smiled and said proudly, you'll know if it's real or fake when you see it. As he spoke, he waved his right hand and a golden ball of light appeared in front of Chen Lan. Ah! Chen Lan was stunned. He did not take the golden ball of light. Instead, he asked Ji Tianxing, if this is really the blueprint of the divine hammer, aren't you afraid that we'll memorize it? Ji Tianxing smiled and said, take a look. If you two can understand it within 3 days, I'll admit defeat. As for memorizing it, don't even think about it. Even if everyone in the 100 refinement ancient sect came to see it, they wouldn't be able to memorize it. The most special thing about the 100 refinement divine hammer is that other than Lian Qianqiu, no one else can memorize its blueprint. Chen Lan was shocked into a daze, and a deep sense of reverence grew in her heart. Uncle Yang frowned and refuted, other than our sect's founder, no one else can memorize the blueprint. How can you memorize it? Doesn't this mean that your blueprint is fake? Ji Tianxing couldn't help but roll his eyes. Yang Shigao, with your IQ, it's hard for us to communicate. I didn't memorize this blueprint by memory. This time, Uncle Yang understood. He said, you mean you have a blueprint of the hammer and you're copying it for us? Ji Tianxing just smiled and didn't want to bother with him anymore. Chen Lan could not wait any longer. She extended her trembling hands and held the golden ball of light. She used her divine sense to read the information within. Instantly, his mind was flooded with information that was as deep as the ocean. It was to the extent that his entire body froze on the spot. It was as if he had fallen asleep and almost lost consciousness. After a long time, he finally calmed his mind and no longer dared to read the information in the light ball. Huff, huff, huff. Chen Lan held the ball of light in her hand as she panted heavily. Her face was somewhat pale. It's too scary. Who would remember such a vast amount of information? I only saw about 10% of it and my mind almost fainted. It's too scary. Seeing that Chen Lan couldn't help but exclaim, Uncle Yang looked expectant and eager to try. Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhan, Zhon Longxiang, and the others were also very interested. They were all shocked and expectant. They were all grandmasters and divine blacksmiths. They also wanted to see how mysterious and terrifying the blueprint of a peerless divine weapon was. Soon, Uncle Yang took the golden ball of light and immersed himself in it. When he took it, his reaction was even worse than Chen Lan's. After only 10 breaths, he felt dizzy and lost control of his mind. As if drunk, he stumbled and fell in the main hall. This is unbelievable. He quickly got up from the ground and exclaimed excitedly, "This is no ordinary divine weapon. It must be a peerless divine weapon. Although I only saw less than 10% of it, I dare say that only a top divine blacksmith can create such a divine weapon." At this moment, Uncle Yang's doubts were dispelled. He was completely convinced by the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and took the golden ball of light back into his hand. Chen Lan and Uncle Yang stared at the ball of light with reluctance. They really wanted to snatch it back. Ji Tianxing kept the golden ball of light and asked, "You've seen the blueprint. Chen Lan, do you want to bet or not?" This time, Uncle Yang didn't have to say anything. Chen Lan nodded without hesitation. Yes, only a fool wouldn't bet. Although the primordial jade marrow was precious, it wasn't as important as the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer. Chen Lan was already fantasizing that if he won the blueprint, he would become a hero of the 100 smelting ancient sect. At that time, he would definitely become the chief disciple. It was even possible that he would inherit the position of the sect leader in the future. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. His face turned red. Uncle Yang didn't forget to remind him, "Young Master Lan, don't forget the time." Chen Lan immediately sobered up. He regained his composure and said to Ji Tianxing, "Young Master Tianxing, I agree to bet with you. However, to be fair, I have a request. Your divine armor already has 130 laws. My divine sword only has 100. Therefore, I want to start the refinement. You have to wait a day before you can continue. If you agree, we can start now." Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi were filled with indignation. They immediately retorted, "Chen Lan, can you be any more shameless? Young Master Tianxing can inscribe 130 laws. That's his ability. Young Master Tianxing has already competed once. Now, you want to continue the competition. You want to lead by a day? How dare you say that?" Chen Lan also felt that he was going overboard. He wanted to change the time to 20 hours. However, before he could say anything, Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement. "All right, the rules are set then." "Good." Chen Lan was overjoyed. He quickly flattered, "Young Master Tianxing is indeed straightforward. You have the demeanor of a master." Since Ji Tianxing had agreed, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi had nothing to say. They could only shut their mouths. The two of them were filled with worry. They could only pray silently, hoping that Ji Tianxing would win. Soon, the competition began. Chen Lan was the first to open the divine cauldron. He placed the golden divine sword that he had previously refined into the cauldron and prepared to inscribe laws and restrictions. Ji Tianxing sat in the main hall with his eyes closed. He waited patiently. An hour later, Chen Lan's divine sword had melted into a sword embryo. It was in a moldable state. He began to inscribe laws and restrictions. 2 hours later, he had inscribed a law and stacked over 100 divine arrays and restrictions. As time passed, he focused on casting the arts. He kept inscribing law and restriction after law. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing became even more anxious when they saw that he was progressing rapidly. However, Ji Tianxing kept his eyes closed. He did not look at Chen Lan at all. He seemed especially calm. Chapter 3479. Unknowingly, a day passed. Ji Tianxing followed the agreement and opened his eyes. He took out the 9 heavens divine cauldron and started refining. At this time, Chen Lan had already engraved 27 laws and 270 array formations on his divine sword. Although compared to Ji Tianxing's divine armor, He was still short of 3 laws and 30 array formations. But he was filled with confidence and anticipation and did not feel worried at all. When Ji Tianxing started refining, he delayed for a breath of time and secretly took a look at Ji Tianxing. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing was as calm and indifferent as ever. He could not see through him at all. Chen Lan thought to himself, this guy is still pretending to be deep. I still can't see through him. Ha ha ha, but no matter how well you pretend, it's useless. You'll be exposed very soon. Previously, you refined continuously for 7 days and only rested for a day in between. There's no way you can maintain your peak state. Next, we still have to engrave more than 170 laws. It'll take at least half a month's time. Let's see how you can persevere. These thoughts flashed through his mind. Chen Lan was no longer distracted and continued to focus on refining. The hall fell into silence. Ji Tianxing and Chen Lan were both immersed in refining without any distractions. Uncle Yang, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhan, and Zhong Longxiong were all watching intently. No one made a sound, afraid that they would disturb Ji Tianxing and Chen Lan. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing and Chen Lan were the 2 divine blacksmiths with the highest attainments in refining among them. In this competition, the 2 of them also gave it their all and brought out their trump cards. Everyone watched intently. While they were filled with amazement and admiration, they also broadened their horizons and learned a lot of experience in refining. Especially Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiong, their hearts were filled with agitation and excitement. To be able to watch 2 divine blacksmiths compete at close range was something that the 2 of them yearned for even in their dreams. Unknowingly, 3 days passed. Ji Tianxing and Chen Lan were still focused on refining and did not slack off at all. But the further they went, the harder it was to refine. The speed also became slower. Chen Lan had engraved 184 laws and over 1,800 formation restrictions on the divine sword. This speed was already his limit, surpassing all his previous refinements. He was confident and proud. He couldn't help but glance at Ji Tianxing. He had thought that Ji Tianxing would definitely look tired and slow down his speed. But he was disappointed. Ji Tianxing was as calm as ever, without the slightest tiredness or sleepiness. His refining speed was as fast as ever. Of course. Only Ji Tianxing himself knew that the Frost Moon divine armor he was refining already had 196 nomological laws. That's right, this godly armor was called Frozen Moon. A long time ago, he had planned to forge 2 divine swords and a set of divine armor for Yun Yao. The dual swords of Sun and Moon had been completed a long time ago. He was going to take this opportunity to refine the Ice Moon divine armor. Unknowingly, 12 days had passed. Chen Lan's refining work was finally coming to an end. He had already engraved 290 nomological laws and 2,900 formation restrictions on the divine sword. In at most another 20 hours, the divine sword would become a mid-grade king-grade divine artifact. Such a fast speed was something Chen Lan had never thought of in the past. Unknowingly, he had already surpassed him. His refining attainments had improved again. He was proud and self-satisfied. He couldn't help but look at Ji Tianxing opposite him. However, when he saw Ji Tianxing across from him, he was dumbfounded on the spot and was stunned. Because Ji Tianxing had just stopped and was casting spells. He raised his head and looked at him. Their eyes met. Ji Tianxing's expression was calm and indifferent. There was a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. But Chen Lan seemed to have been struck by lightning. His body stiffened and his mind went blank. He actually already completed it. At this moment, Chen Lan's heart was in a mess. He felt that everything was unreal. He couldn't believe it, much less accept it. Ji Tianxing had actually completed refining a mid-grade king-grade divine artifact. This couldn't be real. A deep sense of defeat filled Chen Lan's mind, causing his face to turn ashen. The confidence and pride that he was brimming with earlier vanished instantly, turning into disappointment and dejection. Right then, Uncle Yang reminded him with a voice transmission, "Young Master Lan, don't be in a daze. Continue casting your spells. Otherwise, the array formation will be messed up and the divine sword will collapse." Only then did Chen Lan snap out of his daze. He hurriedly suppressed his distracting thoughts and calmed himself down before continuing to refine his weapon. He muttered internally, I haven't lost yet. I can't be distracted. No matter what, I have to refine this divine sword. Even if I lose to him, I can't embarrass myself, and I can't embarrass the sec. With that belief, Chen Lan entered a focused state and continued to refine his weapon without any distractions. Everyone in the hall had already seen the outcome and knew the answer. However, no one disturbed Chen Lan. They waited patiently for him to finish refining his weapon. Time seemed to have slowed down. After another 24 hours, Chen Lan was finally done with her artifact forging. His divine sword was successfully engraved with 300 nomological runes and 3,000 array formations. However, when he finished refining his weapon and stopped, there was only a sigh of relief. There was no joy at all. It's over. He muttered to himself and raised his head to look at Ji Tianxing, who was in front of him. Ji Tianxing, who had been resting with his eyes closed, finally opened his eyes and said calmly, although the outcome is already decided, we still have to show off our results, right? Chen Lan was depressed. He nodded stiffly and waved his hand to open the cauldron lid. Swoosh! Golden light flashed. The golden divine sword flew into the air and floated quietly, shining with dazzling divine light. The appearance of the divine sword did not change much. It was just that its divine power aura was sharper and more sacred. The number of nomological runes and restrictions within it had also tripled. It had successfully become a medium-grade king-level divine weapon. At that moment, Ji Tianxing also opened the cauldron lid. Swoosh! Ice-blue divine light flashed and a bone-chilling cold spread, freezing the entire hall once again. The ice moon divine armor flew into the air and floated quietly, shining with dazzling light. Compared to Chen Lan's divine sword, this divine armor was more beautiful, exquisite, and dazzling. Moreover, the divine armor's structure was more complicated. Its defense was stronger and it had all sorts of functions. Most importantly, the number of nomological laws contained within the armor was as many as 303. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing had held back again. Not only did he spend 1 day less than Chen Lan, but he also engraved 3 more nomological runes. A complete victory. A complete victory without any suspense. At that moment, Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi were cheering excitedly and clapping excitedly. Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang were also impressed. They clapped and cheered as they looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes full of respect and admiration. As for Chen Lan and Uncle Yang, their expressions were ugly and gloomy. They had lost the competition. Not only did they have to withdraw from the competition, but they also had to give up on the 2 blacksmithing geniuses. What made Chen Lan feel even more pained was that the primordial jade marrow that he had been saving to break through to an upper-level god king was about to change owners. Chapter 3480. Chen Lan had nothing to say about the results of the competition, even though he had defeated Jiang Tianyi in the first round. However, after Ji Tianxing joined the battle, he won both battles. Everyone had seen the competition with their own eyes, and they were full of admiration for Ji Tianxing's skills. Chen Lan had lost to Ji Tianxing, but he accepted it wholeheartedly and did not feel embarrassed. He could feel that the gap between him and Ji Tianxing was huge. However, this did not mean that he could accept the results. The blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer was extremely precious, and he and Uncle Yang had seen it with their own eyes. However, he regretted it now and hated that he had been blinded by the temptation. Only now did he understand why Ji Tianxing had used the blueprint, which was 10 times more precious than the primordial jade essence, as a bet. He was confident that he would win. From the start, he had fallen into Ji Tianxing's trap. However, the bait was too tempting, and he and Uncle Yang had no choice but to take the bait. When he thought about how the primordial jade essence, which was like his second life, was going to be given to Ji Tianxing, his heart ached and his breathing became hot. Soon, the hall regained its silence. Ji Tianxing also kept the 9 heavens cauldron and ice moon divine armor, and looked at Chen Lan calmly. Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to speak, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing said impatiently, Chen Lan, our Jiang clan has won this competition. You have to withdraw from the competition between the two blacksmithing geniuses. Also, you have to accept your loss. Chen Lan, it's time for you to honor your bet. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's voices were filled with excitement and pride, and they looked at Chen Lan with sympathy. Chen Lan was ashamed and angry, but he could only endure it. With so many people watching, he could not go back on his words. After taking a deep breath and calming himself down, Chen Lan said expressionlessly, I have lost. According to the agreement, I will leave Perpetual Joy City today. Furthermore, I will not take the initiative to invite the two blacksmithing geniuses to join the 100 Smelting Ancient sect. However, those two geniuses are not willing to join the same sect, so you can only accept one at most. Do you think you have one? Ha ha ha. Naive. Hearing Chen Lan's words, the smiles on Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's faces froze. That's right. Although Chen Lan wanted to withdraw from the competition, the Jiang clan could only recruit one artificer. It was very likely that the other genius would take the initiative to join the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. Chen Lan had only promised that she would not take the initiative to recruit any of them, but she had not promised to reject any of them. In the end, the 100 Refinements Ancient sect still got the upper hand. Thinking of this, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's excitement instantly vanished. Seeing the two of them deflated and depressed, Chen Lan revealed a smug sneer. He then turned to Ji Tianxing, cupped his fists and saluted, Young Master Tianxing, this king admires your attainments and skills in refining artifacts, and I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. However, the primordial chalcedony was too precious, so I didn't carry it with me. I've always left it in the sect. How about this? I'll go back to the sect and get it for you now. Chen Lan lowered her head slightly, observing Ji Tianxing's reaction as she spoke. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Jiang Tianxing's face was filled with anger as he shouted, Chen Lan, are you trying to renege on your debt? This place is so far away from the 100 Refinements Ancient sect, are you trying to buy time? Chen Lan quickly waved his hands and smiled, you misunderstood. This king is upright, so how can I renege on my debt? If young Master Tianxing doesn't believe me, then follow me back to the sect to get it. Jiang Tianyi was also very dissatisfied, and he said coldly, Chen Lan, don't play these tricks. Do you think we can't see through your thoughts? Ha ha ha. Chen Lan sneered with disdain and shrugged helplessly, you're measuring the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. If you don't believe me, then there's nothing I can do. Uncle Yang also quickly chimed in and said righteously, young Master Lan has already said that we won't renege on our debt. The primordial chalcedony will definitely be given to young Master Tianxing. However, young Master Lan didn't bring it with him, so he needs to go back to the sect to get it. How can you be so aggressive? You're shameless. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were speechless, and they could only suppress the anger in their hearts. They both suspected that the primordial chalcedony was on Chen Lan, and that Chen Lan was just trying to find an excuse to escape. However, without any evidence, they couldn't do anything to Chen Lan. At this time, Ji Tianxing, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. He looked at Chen Lan calmly and said, how precious is the primordial chalcedony? You must treat it like your life, so how can you not bring it with you? You probably think that this king won't fall out with you, and won't search or rob you. That's why you lied so brazenly, right? Having her thoughts exposed, Chen Lan's body stiffened and her expression turned ugly. However, he immediately pretended to be angry and shouted righteously, young Master Tianxing, even if this king respects you as a senior, you can't slander me and frame me for no reason. Everything I said is true. If you don't believe me, you can follow me back to the 100 Refinements Ancient sect. Before he could finish, Ji Tianxing raised his hand and interrupted him. He said calmly, there's no need to go through so much trouble. As long as you set up an altar and swear to the heavens that you don't have the primordial chalcedony, if you go against your oath, you're willing to be struck by lightning until you're reduced to ashes. Your divine Tao will be destroyed, and you'll never be reincarnated. As long as you do that, this king will believe you. How about that? Chen Lan's face turned green, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He would never dare to swear to the heavens in such a solemn manner. After all, one couldn't simply swear an oath. The heavens would fulfill it. Seeing that Chen Lan was speechless, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing laughed mockingly and scolded him. Ha 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 ha. Chen Lan, are you feeling guilty? You don't dare to swear to the heavens, do you? You're still saying that you're not going to go back on your word. To think that you were acting so well just now. I didn't expect you to be exposed so quickly. Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang watched from the side. They didn't have the right to interrupt. However, there was a subtle change in their expressions. Their impression of Chen Lan dropped even further. Actually, everyone already knew the answer in their hearts. Chen Lan was so embarrassed that he wanted to make an oath on the altar. However, Uncle Yang pulled him back and advised him, "Young Master Lan, don't be rash. You can't simply swear such an oath. It's very easy for it to come true. The price is too high." After saying that, he glared at Ji Tianxing and said coldly, "Young Master Tianxing, you're being so overbearing. Don't you think you're looking down on the 100 Refinements ancient sect? Furthermore, you're a senior expert. How can you make things difficult for a junior? You even forced young Master Lan to swear such a vicious oath." Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "You're right. This king really doesn't care about the 100 Refinements ancient sect. Cut the crap. If you don't hand over the primordial jade essence today, don't even think about leaving the Gold Laurel Palace." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3481. It seems like you're determined to offend the 100 Refinements ancient sect and not let us go. Chen Lan also flew into a rage out of humiliation. He glared fiercely at Ji Tianxing and asked in a deep voice. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing sneered. He. Chen Lan, you're really good at twisting the truth. You're the one who refused to honor your bet and yet you're still trying to twist the truth. Chen Lan, I didn't expect you to be so shameless. Luckily, there are so many of us here. If you're determined to go back on your word, we'll let the other clans see how despicable you are. Although Lin Zhan and Zhong Longxiang did not speak, they knew that things were serious. Both of them retreated to the edge of the hall to avoid being implicated. Ji Tianxing glared at Chen Lan and said sternly, "I'll say it one last time. Hand over the primordial jade essence or you'll have to bear the consequences." Bear the consequences. Uncle Yang was completely enraged. His body shone with a dazzling divine light as his divine energy surged. "You've gone too far. I won't give in. If you want to bully young Master Lan, you'll have to go through me first." As he spoke, Uncle Yang stepped in front of Chen Lan and spoke in a dignified manner, "Young Master Lan, I'll cover your escape." Chen Lan had the same idea. However, how could he act so cowardly in front of so many people? His body shone with divine light as his divine energy surged. He said confidently, "Uncle Yang, we're disciples of the 100 Refinements ancient sect. Of course, we'll leave with our heads held high. I'd like to see what kind of ability this guy has to be so arrogant." Seeing Chen Lan and Uncle Yang's boiling fighting spirit, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing also laughed out of anger, their bodies bursting with fighting spirit. "What? Not only do you want to go back on your word, you want to fight. You want to fight now that you can't go back on your word. Who's afraid of who? Come on." The two brothers stepped forward and stood on Ji Tianxing's left and right. The atmosphere in the hall instantly became hostile. On the surface, Chen Lan and Uncle Yang only had 2 people while Ji Tianxing had 3 people. Moreover, Ji Tianxing was a senior expert with a mysterious background. Chen Lan and Uncle Yang's aura was immediately suppressed. Their eyes were filled with fear. Uncle Yang frowned and instructed Chen Lan via voice transmission, "Young Master Lan, I'll hold the 3 of them back. You take the opportunity to escape from the back. As long as you shake them off, they will be wary of the 100 Refinement ancient sect and won't do anything to me." This time, their conversation would not be heard by anyone else. Without waiting for Uncle Yang to finish, Chen Lan replied without hesitation, "All right, then be careful." Uncle Yang's expression was a little strange, and he quickly swallowed the rest of his words back into his stomach. In the next moment, he shouted in a tragic tone and waved his fists to attack Ji Tianxing. "This old man will not tolerate your bullying." Uncle Yang used all of his power and instantly sent out 49 flaming fists towards Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and Jiang Tiansheng. Each of the flaming fists was as big as a water tank, and their divine power was violent. They also contained dozens of divine Dao laws, and their power was terrifying. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tiansheng's expressions were solemn. They used all of their divine power to block and neutralize Uncle Yang's attack. However, before they could do anything, they saw a blur in front of their eyes, and a sky full of sword light bloomed. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Ji Tianxing had made his move. Unknowingly, he held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and instantly sent out 49 flaming white sword lights to meet Uncle Yang's attack. Bang! 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 Muffled sounds erupted as the 49 flaming fist lights were shattered by the sword light, and divine flames that covered the heavens and the earth burst forth. However, the white sword lights tore through space and caused a few pitch-black voids to appear in the hall. The divine flames that covered the sky and earth were all swallowed by the dark voids, and no one was harmed. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tiansheng were shocked. Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiong were secretly relieved, and their respect for Ji Tianxing grew. Uncle Yang was also stunned. He had expected Ji Tianxing to be more powerful than him, most likely a high-level divine lord. However, he had never thought that Ji Tianxing would use such a simple and violent method to neutralize his attack. The hall was still intact, and his plan to create chaos and give Chen Lan a chance to escape had failed. However, he didn't want to give up. He shouted again and used a divine power. This time, he had learned his lesson. Attacking Ji Tianxing was secondary. His main goal was to disperse his attacks and destroy the entire hall to create chaos. However, Uncle Yang was about to use his divine power when he saw a blur in front of his eyes and a figure appeared out of nowhere. In his eyes, there was a fist that was rapidly enlarging. Uncle Yang realized that something was wrong and instinctively wanted to retreat. However, it was too late. Boom! With a loud bang, Ji Tianxing's golden left fist hit Uncle Yang's forehead. Uncle Yang was immediately sent flying and smashed into the wall 100 feet away. More than half of the wall collapsed, and countless pieces of rock were sent flying. Uncle Yang, on the other hand, fell to the ground. His consciousness was blurry and he was unconscious. It was obvious that Ji Tianxing's punch had passed through his forehead and hit his mind, knocking him out. Swish! While the divine light flashed and the pieces of rock were sent flying, Chen Lan decisively retreated and passed through the collapsed wall, trying to escape the gold Osmanthus palace. However, he had just flown out of the hall and appeared in the sky above the manor when a white figure flashed in front of him. Ji Tianxing had blocked his way. Swish! Chen Lan didn't hesitate and used his teleportation technique to move a few thousand miles away from Chang'e City. Unfortunately, the moment he used his teleportation ability, Ji Tianxing slashed out a blazing white sword light and sealed off the entire space of the Gold Laurel Palace. The space around Chen Lan froze. He was like a mosquito in ice, unable to move at all. Swish! A cold light flashed, and the pitch-black and cold sword of burial of heaven was placed against his neck. Chen Lan's body stiffened and his expression turned ugly. He didn't dare to act rashly. The battle had just begun, but it ended abruptly just like that. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tiansheng, who had followed closely behind, held their divine weapons and looked murderous. However, when they saw that Uncle Yang had been knocked unconscious and Chen Lan had surrendered, they were stunned and quickly put away their weapons. Soon, Lin Zhan and the battle dragon elephant appeared in the courtyard. Chen Lan was utterly humiliated in front of everyone. He was furious and humiliated to the extreme. He made up his mind and roared at Ji Tianxing, "I don't have the jade essence, but I do have a life." Ji Tianxing narrowed his eyes and exuded a bone-chilling aura. He asked in a low voice, "Are you sure?" Seeing that he was really angry and filled with murderous intent, Chen Lan didn't doubt that he would really kill him. Thus, Chen Lan quickly corrected himself. I'm not sure. Senior, I was just joking." Chapter 3482. If it were anyone else, Chen Lan would bet that they would be afraid of the 100-smelting ancient sect's reputation and would not dare to kill him. But Ji Tianxing was different. This guy had a mysterious background and was decisive in his methods. His strength was unfathomable. Most importantly, this guy looked calm and low-key, but in reality, he was lawless and killed people like they were grass. Chen Lan did not dare to risk his life, so he chose to admit defeat. Seeing Ji Tianxing's brows relax and the cold murderous aura dissipate, Chen Lan heaved a sigh of relief. His back was already drenched in cold sweat, and his limbs were numb from the bone-chilling cold. Chen Lan grinned and opened his spatial ring with trembling hands. He took out a ball of light. Swoosh! It was an ice-blue ball of light. It was dazzling and filled with divine power. Within the ball of light, there was a ball of white water droplets. They were as bright as diamonds, but also as clear as nectar. Even though they were separated by the ice-blue ball of light, everyone could feel the surging power of the white water droplets. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment. After confirming that it was a 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony, he kept the burial of heaven. You can get lost now. He kept the primordial chalcedony in his spatial ring and looked at Chen Lan from the corner of his eyes. Chen Lan glared at him viciously. He did not dare to say another word and quickly turned to fly away. But just as he flew 1,000 feet away, Ji Tianxing shouted again. Take Yang Shangao away. Chen Lan was stunned for a moment. Then he remembered that Uncle Yang had been knocked unconscious by Ji Tianxing and was still lying in the ruins. He was so embarrassed that he could not show his face. He flew back to the half-collapsed hall, carried the unconscious Uncle Yang, and quickly left the Gold Laurel Palace. After a while, the Gold Laurel Palace regained its peace. Only Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Lin Zhan, and Zhon Longxiang were left. Ji Tianxing did not care about what happened next. Jiang Tianyi looked at the two blacksmithing geniuses with a smile and said sincerely, Lin Zhan, Zhon Longxiang, I already know about the two of you. Both of you are very talented and you are very lucky to have met ninth brother. If you join our Jiang clan, you will be able to learn more profound refining techniques. Only then will you have the chance to break through to the God King realm. Although this prince knows that there are some grudges between the two of you and that you don't want to coexist for the time being. But I have already thought of a countermeasure and arranged everything. If the two of you join the Jiang clan, I will let the two of you cultivate separately. You won't see each other and won't disturb each other. Jiang Tianyi knew it was futile. He was destined to only be able to recruit one genius and lose the other. However, he still wanted to give it a try and make a final effort. After persuading them earnestly, he looked at Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang expectantly and asked, May I ask if you are willing to join the Jiang clan? Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang looked at Ji Tianxing at the same time and nodded. I'm willing. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were both overjoyed and surprised. Seeing that they were one step closer to success, the two of them felt a little nervous. Jiang Tianxing asked carefully, even if the other party joins the Jiang clan, you don't mind? Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang looked at each other and turned their heads away with contempt and disdain. The two of them looked at Ji Tianxing and nodded at the same time. We don't mind. What? Are you serious? Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were stunned. They thought they had heard wrongly and were in disbelief. They didn't expect the two blacksmithing geniuses to change their minds and join the Jiang clan at the same time. This was definitely a pleasant surprise. Seeing the two brothers so excited and in disbelief, Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiang nodded again to confirm. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were sure that they didn't hear wrongly and didn't see wrongly. They couldn't hold back their excitement and cheered. That's great. Both of you know the big picture. You are indeed talented. The Jiang clan needs geniuses like you. That's right. You can't throw away your bright future just because of a fit of pique. You have chosen to join the Jiang clan. This is the best decision you have made in your life. For many years to come, you will thank yourselves for making the right choice. The two brothers were excited and in high spirits. At this moment, Zhon Longxiang asked, May I know what position Senior Tianxing holds in the Jiang clan? May I be so bold and shameless as to ask to be Senior Tianxing's disciple? Will I be so lucky? Lin Zhan panicked when he heard Zhon Longxiang speak first. He quickly said, I was about to say this, but Zhon Longxiang beat me to it. I, Lin Zhan, beg Senior Tianxing to take me in. Although I am mediocre and stupid, I dare not hope for Senior's love. But as long as Senior agrees, even if this disciple has to follow by your side as a servant, I'm willing to do so. Zhon Longxiang looked sideways and shouted angrily, Lin Zhen, how can you be so shameless? I was the one who suggested it first. Lin Zhen smirked and raised his chin. So what if you said it first? The key is who Senior Tianqing chooses. Zhon Longxiang said angrily, even if he chooses me, he won't choose you. You grease-faced, hypocritical, cunning fellow. Hee hee. Lin Zhen still smirked. That's because you're too dumb and stupid. It'd be strange if Senior likes you. The two blacksmithing geniuses started arguing in front of everyone again. Ji Tianxing looked indifferent and did not take it to heart. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were dumbfounded. The two brothers looked at each other awkwardly and secretly communicated with each other through voice transmission. He. Looks like we're thinking too much. The two of them are willing to join the Jiang clan not because they've thought it through, but because of young Master Tianxing. That's right. If they were attracted by the Jiang clan's environment and resources, they would have agreed from the start. Now that they're arguing so fiercely, it's all for young Master Tianxing. There's no choice. Young Master Tianxing is too mysterious and demonic. The two of them would rather be young Master Tianxing's servants than join our Jiang clan. We really have to thank young Master Tianxing for this. He's helped us a lot. If not for him, this matter would not have been resolved. One of the geniuses would have been snatched away by Chen Lan. Then why didn't you believe me before? Why did you doubt young Master Tianxing's ability? He. Seventh brother, don't blame me. I was worried that things would go wrong and we'd lose two blacksmithing geniuses. But speaking of which, my attitude was not good and I offended young Master Tianxing. I'll have to apologize to him later. I hope he won't take it to heart. He's our Jiang clan's benefactor. If the clan leader knows that I offended him, he'll skin me alive. The two brothers whispered to each other through telepathy. Lin Zhen and Zhon Longxiang stopped arguing. This was because Ji Tianxing said something. I haven't taken in any disciples for many years, nor have I taught others how to refine weapons. Since you've joined the Jiang clan, someone will naturally arrange for your cultivation and learning. Chapter 3483. Ji Tianxing refused. The two blacksmithing geniuses had nothing to fight over. After all, this senior of the Jiang clan had a high status. His abilities and methods were too mysterious. Although the two of them had pretty good talent in artifact refinement, they were only two high divine lords. They definitely did not have the qualifications to discuss any conditions with a divine king powerhouse. Jiang Tianxing asked when he saw that Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant were silent. Their expressions and eyes were filled with disappointment and regret. Then, are you still willing to join the Jiang clan? As soon as he said it, he regretted it. Jiang Tianyi even glared at him and scolded him through voice transmission. Are you a pig? Jiang Tianxing wanted to slap himself. Luckily, Lin Zhen and Zhon Longxiang hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly. Since we've agreed to join the Jiang clan, how can we go back on our words? Although we're not strong enough, we won't go back on our words. We'll definitely fulfill our promise. Although they did not meet their expectations, they could not take back their words. A man could not live without integrity. If the two of them couldn't even do this, how could they maintain their firm will and become divine blacksmiths that they would look up to for the rest of their lives? Not long after, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the rest left the Gold Laurel Palace. Previously, they had spent nearly 28 days in the Gold Laurel Palace to compete in refining weapons. But in reality, only 5 days and a few hours had passed in the outside world. When they left the Gold Laurel Palace, the sky was just starting to brighten. Jiang Tianyi looked at Lin Zhen and Zhon Longxiang and said, "We'll be leaving Tranquil City soon and returning to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. You have 6 hours to pack your bags and say goodbye to your families. At noon, we'll meet at the south gate of Tranquil City." Lin Zhen and Zhon Longxiang nodded to show that they understood. Then, they bowed and left. After they returned home, Jiang Tianyi brought Jiang Tianxing and Ji Tianxing to the south gate of Tranquil City. The three of them bathed in the morning mist and breathed in the fresh air. They were in a good mood. Of course, the Jiang brothers were excited because they had won against the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect and obtained 2 blacksmithing geniuses. The reason Ji Tianxing was so happy was because of the primordial chalcedony. 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony. Its effects were even more ferocious than high-grade king-grade divine pills. I have to find some time to refine it and break through to the 3rd heaven of the God-King realm. After reaching the 3rd stage realm, you're not far from becoming a middle divine king. He calculated in his heart that after he became a middle-level God-King, he would be able to sweep away all of the middle-level God-Kings. Even if he met a 7th stage realm high-level God-King, he would not be afraid at all. Just as Ji Tianxing was filled with longing, Jiang Tianxing's voice rang in his ears. Young Master Tianxing, I would like to solemnly apologize to you for my previous recklessness and rudeness. It's my fault for being blind and lacking in knowledge. Ji Tianxing's thoughts were interrupted. He looked sideways at Jiang Tianxing and frowned. He didn't say anything, but Jiang Tianxing's heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, it's over. Is my apology not sincere enough? From the looks of it, you must be holding a grudge against me. What should I do? When he thought of this, he looked at Jiang Tianyi for help. Jiang Tianyi was also very worried. He hurriedly persuaded, young Master Tianxing, 9th brother is young and ignorant. He didn't mean to offend you. Please forgive us. As they spoke, the 2 brothers bowed apologetically, as if they were admitting their mistakes and apologizing for their sins. Ji Tianxing was even more speechless. He chuckled and said, am I such a petty person? Jiang Tianxing was about to say something, but Jiang Tianyi secretly pinched him and answered with a smile, of course not. But 9th brother must apologize for his mistake. I hope you can forgive him. All right, I never blamed him in the first place. There's no need to talk about forgiveness. Ji Tianxing waved his hand. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief. The 2 brothers hurriedly followed Ji Tianxing's footsteps. Jiang Tianyi asked, young Master Tianxing, how do you know so much about the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? Also, we've only heard of the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer. Not only do you know it thoroughly, you even have the blueprint. Jiang Tianxing hurried over and asked mysteriously, young Master Tianhang, the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer must be fake, right? You only used it to provoke Chen Lan and make him agree to compete with you. Because you're certain that you can win and take away his primordial jade essence, right? Jiang Tianxing was very agitated and spoke very quickly. But just as he finished speaking, he was slapped by Jiang Tianyi on the back of his head and rolled his eyes. Jiang Tianxing finally reacted. He was too agitated and said the wrong thing again. Although Jiang Tianyi also suspected that Ji Tianxing's blueprint was fake, he still thought about it. But this was something that everyone could only think in their hearts. How could they ask? What surprised Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing even more was that Ji Tianxing was not angry. Instead, he said calmly, is it important whether it's real or fake? Anyway, Chen Lan didn't get it, right? The 2 brothers immediately understood and nodded their heads. Yes, young Master Tianxing is right. Too amazing. Indeed, the older the ginger, the spicier it is. Too admirable. After a round of flattery, Jiang Tianxing raised another question. But, young Master Tianxing, although we know that the blueprint is fake, Chen Lan and the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect are certain that it's real. This news will definitely spread to the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. Those old fellows will definitely go crazy looking for you. No matter what method they use, they will definitely get the blueprint. Won't you be in danger then? Before Ji Tianxing could reply, Jiang Tianyi glared at Jiang Tianxing again. If young Master Tianxing isn't worried, what are you worried about? Moreover, young Master Tianxing is very powerful. He said that even Shu Bai Lian has to call him senior. What's there to worry about? Moreover, young Master Tianxing wants to follow us back to the Divine Attraction Grotto. Those old fellows from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect won't dare to barge into the Divine Attraction Grotto and snatch him from the Jiang clan. Jiang Tianxing pondered for a while and felt that it made sense. He nodded his head and said, that's right. Then we have nothing to worry about. Unknowingly, The three of them had passed through Tranquil City and arrived at the south gate. Originally, the three of them were going to wait for Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiong at the south gate. However, Ji Tianxing did not want to waste time. He entered Jiang Tianyi's palace first. He entered the secret room, took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and entered the distorted space to cultivate. Although he said that he was going to cultivate in seclusion, he was actually going to use the time to refine the primordial jade marrow and break through to the 3rd level of the Divine King realm as soon as possible. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing could only wait at the city gate. It was still early. The two brothers had nothing to do, so they started to chat. Seventh brother, how did you meet young Master Tianxing? How can there be such a coincidence? Oh right, what's his cultivation level? Logically speaking, he saved the Jiang clan 1,000 years ago. He should be a peak divine king, right? But why doesn't he look like one? Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3484. Even though the Jiang clan did not have a peak divine king, but there were still a few high-rank divine kings. But Jiang Tianxing observed Ji Tianxing for so long and did not see any signs or aura of a high-rank divine king. Jiang Tianyi also frowned, recalling the scene of Ji Tianxing and Bai Feng fighting back then. He was very clear that Bai Feng only had 7th-level divine king realm strength, an existence at the bottom of the hierarchy among high-rank divine kings. But Ji Tianxing fought with Bai Feng for so long. Not only did he not win easily, he was even injured, appearing a little wretched. This proved that Ji Tianxing's strength was inferior to Bai Feng's. Which was also to say that not only was he not a peak divine king, he was not even a high-rank divine king. Because of this, Jiang Tianyi also suspected before in his heart and muttered for a long time. But apart from that, Ji Tianxing's performance did not have any problems. For a moment, he was also somewhat at a loss. Seeing his reaction, Jiang Tianyi could not resist asking, "Seventh brother, this young Master Tianxing's strength, there wouldn't really be a problem, right?" Jiang Tianyi waved his hand and said, "Although there are some problems, I still can't figure it out until now. But don't pursue it either. Everyone has their own experiences, stories, and unspeakable troubles. Rashly probing into other people's past will incur enmity in light cases and enmity in heavy cases. You have to remember this point and never do it again in the future. Furthermore, young Master Tianxing has no ill intentions towards us and even helped us greatly. That's enough." Jiang Tianyi nodded half understanding and did not say anything else. Finally, 6 hours passed. The scorching sun rose into the sky. Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiong arrived at the southern city gate one after another. Lin Zhan was escorted out of Perpetual Joy City by the Lin family, full of reluctance. Zhon Longxiong's situation was much bleaker. There were only a few junior brothers and sisters behind him. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi were both divine kings, high and mighty major figures. They naturally would not persuade the Lin family and Perpetual Joy Dao College people. The two of them watched coldly from the sidelines, silently watching Lin Zhan and Zhon Longxiong wave goodbye to their family and friends. Then, Jiang Tianyi took out his palace and brought the two artifact refinement geniuses into the firmament, flying away. On the other side, Chen Lan and Uncle Yang were on a divine ship, flying towards the southeast at lightning speed. Uncle Yang's injuries were not serious, and he had already regained consciousness. However, his face was very gloomy, and his eyes flashed with terrifying killing intent. Chen Lan's face was also dark. Her aura was ice-cold, and she was silent. Although the two of them did not speak, their thoughts were the same. Chen Lan had already sent a message to the left protector and sect master of the 100 Refinements ancient sect about what had happened in the Gold Cassia Palace. However, the two of them still felt that they had to return to the 100 Refinements ancient sect as soon as possible and explain some matters to the left protector and the sect master. Both of them were silent for a long time. Uncle Yang suddenly opened his mouth and exhorted Chen Lan, "Young Master Lan, although I was injured by Tianxing and your primordial jade essence was cheated by him, I still have a chance. However, these were all trivial matters. Even if the left protector and the sect master knew about it, they might not make a big fuss over it. Therefore, the main point of our report is the blueprint of the 100 refining divine hammer. Only the blueprint can provoke the elders, the two protectors, and the sect master. Believe me, if we make use of the blueprint, the sect master, the protectors, and the elders will go crazy and attack Tianqing with all their might. When that happens, our chance for revenge will come. Uncle Yang's tone was very serious, and his words were very sincere. There was also a hint of hatred in his voice. However, Chen Lan was very upset. When he heard the two words Tianqing, he was about to explode. His chest was burning with flames, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. As such, he growled impatiently, "Of course I know that. Do I need you to remind me? Of course, your injuries are not important. However, my primordial jade essence is very important. That is a treasure that I am saving for when I break through to the upper Divine King stage. That's my lifeblood. Do you understand?" Uncle Yang was flustered by Chen Lan's roar. He subconsciously looked below Chen Lan's waist. "What are you looking at?" Chen Lan glared at him with reddened eyes and growled again. Uncle Yang was completely speechless. He decided to ignore him and focus on driving the divine warship. At the same time, in a certain empire in the middle of the Hengshan region, a dazzling golden light streaked across the sky like an aurora, flying towards the south. The object in the golden light was not the divine warship. Instead, it was a huge hairpin that was about 1,000 feet long. Without a doubt, this was the space-piercing hairpin of the divine envoy Shadow Executioner. Inside the space-piercing hairpin, there were only divine envoy Shadow Executioner, divine envoy Ku Yun, divine envoy Xingxiong, and Bai Feng. Over the past few days, the four divine kings had been taking turns to drive the space-piercing hairpin, rushing to the Hengshan region as quickly as possible. During this process, the three divine envoys even asked Bai Feng to cast a spell to detect the whereabouts of Ji Tianqing and the others. Fortunately, the results of Bai Feng's investigation allowed the three divine envoys to heave a sigh of relief. Ji Tianqing and the others were still in the Hengshan region. Furthermore, they had stopped within the Hengshan Empire and had not moved. This result caused the three divine envoys' eyes to light up. They were filled with hope. Could it be that those traitors are hiding in the Hengshan Empire and not running away anymore? Ha ha ha. They must have thought that they would be safe after escaping into the Hengshan region and hiding within the Hengshan Empire. But they would never have imagined that we still have Divine King Bai Feng. No matter where they escape to, Divine King Bai Feng will be able to find them. Since they are hiding in the Hengshan Empire and not leaving, then things will be easy. Thus, the space-piercing hairpin rushed towards the Hengshan Empire. The three divine envoys also made up their minds to find Ji Tianqing and the others even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground. Just this afternoon, after the space-piercing hairpin entered the Hengshan Empire, the three divine envoys then asked Bai Feng to cast a secret spell to detect the whereabouts of Ji Tianqing and the others. Although they knew that Ji Tianqing and the others were in the Hengshan Empire, the Hengshan region was too large. However, the Hengshan Empire was too big, so it was impossible to find Ji Tianqing and the others in a short period of time. Only when Bai Feng cast a secret spell to roughly determine the whereabouts of Ji Tianqing and the others would they be able to search for them. Hearing the orders of the three divine envoys, Bai Feng felt like cursing in his heart. Every time he cast a secret spell, he would use up a huge amount of divine power. His mind would also be extremely tired. More importantly, he could vaguely sense that every time he cast a secret spell, it would affect his lifespan and divine Tao foundation. Thus, he would only cast it once or twice every few years. But now, he had to use it every few days. Moreover, the three divine envoys were staring at him with a firm attitude. He had to cast a secret spell. Apart from casting a secret spell, he also had to take turns controlling the space-piercing hairpin. Bai Feng was already very, very tired. He felt like he was about to be hollowed out. But he could not disobey the orders. He could only grit his teeth and continue casting the secret spell. Finally, he found the whereabouts of Ji Tianqing and the others. They are still in the Hengshan Empire, but they have already moved. They are fleeing towards the south. After he found out, Bai Feng collapsed to the ground with a pale face. He was completely exhausted. Chapter 3485. Unfortunately, The three divine envoys only cared about the results. They did not care about Bai Feng's condition. Was he tired? Could he persevere? At this moment, they were all very excited, and they looked as if they were determined to win. That's great. They are still in the Hongshan Empire and are not far from us. That's not right. They did not move for the past few days. Why did they suddenly move today? Could it be that they also have some divine ability that can detect our approach? That's impossible. They are not Bai Feng. How could they have such ability? No matter what, we are now in the Hongshan Empire and are very close to them. Didn't they escape towards the south? Let's just chase them towards the south. If there are no accidents, we can find them within 2 days at most. Alright, let's fly towards the south now. At the same time, inform the group of god kings behind us to catch up as soon as possible. The three divine envoys discussed for a while and quickly came up with a plan. Throughout the entire process, no one looked at Bai Feng. Bai Feng forcefully propped up his nearly unconscious body and crawled up from the ground. He silently put away his command flag. Then, he sat cross-legged on the ground and consumed a divine pill to recover his divine power. As for where Ji Tianxing and the others were and when they would be caught, he did not care at all. He only knew. He was very tired now. His entire body had been hollowed out, and his mind was in a daze. If he did not properly recuperate, his foundation of the divine Tao would be destroyed. Not to mention that he would become a cripple, but his strength would also regress and affect his future cultivation. Of course, recuperating was not something that could be completed in 3 to 5 days. If possible, he really wanted to recuperate in seclusion for 3 to 5 years. Inside the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. Only a day and a half had passed in the outside world, but Ji Tianxing had already been in seclusion for 2.5 months. In these 2.5 months, he only did one thing. Refine the primordial chalcedony. Although a 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony was an excellent god-king grade material. If he spent some time and effort, and added a few top-grade herbs, he could refine it into a high-grade king-grade divine pill. After consuming it, the effects would be excellent and its power would double. However, Ji Tianxing could not wait any longer. He had neither the time nor the means to find so many top-notch medicinal herbs. After all, wanting to gather those few medicinal herbs, they very likely had to search the entire boundless heaven continent. He might even have to enter the grotto heavens and blessed lands to make deals with the ancient clans. In fact, he even had to leave the firmament and enter the void to search for some of the top-tier materials. After some rough estimation, these things were not something that could be completed in 3 to 5 years. At least 100 years. How could Ji Tianxing have so much time to waste? Therefore, he chose to refine the primordial chalcedony directly. This was the simplest and most crude method. Of course, the effect was also the weakest. If one were to say that refining the primordial chalcedony into a high-grade king-level divine pill would double the effects, then refining it into a high-grade king-level divine pill would have double the effect. If he directly refined the primordial jade marrow now, he would only have 60% to 70% of the effect. But Ji Tianxing didn't care. The primordial chalcedony was precious, but the treasures he had in his previous life were much more valuable than it. Furthermore, he was confident that he would obtain more treasures similar to the primordial chalcedony in the future. 2.5 months was enough for Ji Tianxing to completely refine the primordial chalcedony. What was gratifying was that the effect was not bad. He successfully absorbed the energy of the primordial chalcedony and his divine power increased by several times. Then, he naturally broke through to the 3rd level of the Divine King realm. That was not all. After breaking through to the 3rd level of the Divine King realm, his power was still increasing rapidly without any signs of stopping. Every few days, his power would increase by 1-fold. After 2.5 months, when the potential of the primordial chalcedony was exhausted, he reached the 3rd level of the Divine King realm. That's right. He was indeed in the 3rd level of the Divine King realm, just 1 step away from the Great Circle. In other words, he was only 2 steps away from becoming a 4th-level Divine King. This result surprised Ji Tianxing. But after thinking about it carefully, it was reasonable. In my previous life, I once obtained a portion of the primordial chalcedony from the left guardian of the 100 Refinements ancient sect. I spent a lot of time and effort to refine it into a king-grade high-grade divine pill. After consuming it, my power did increase by 1-fold. But at that time, I was in the 9th level of the divine king realm, very close to the peak. Now, I am only in the 2nd level of the divine king realm. It is normal for me to have such an effect after refining a portion of the primordial chalcedony. Ji Tianqing thought about it and felt relieved. But he still felt that it was a pity. He sighed to himself. Sigh. It is a pity that there is not much of this primordial chalcedony. If there was half more, I would be able to break through to the 4th level of the divine king realm. At that time, I would be able to become a middle-level divine king and save so much time. His situation was getting more and more dangerous. Therefore, his desire for power was getting stronger and stronger. It was also because of this that he wasted such a precious item and could not wait to refine the primordial chalcedony. Phew, after ending his seclusion, Ji Tianqing let out a long breath and decided to leave the distorted space-time. Swoosh. He left the divine pagoda and returned to the secret room in the Palace of Heaven's Will. At this time, the door of the secret room flashed with divine light and let out a series of hurried chimes. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing, who was originally in a relaxed and happy mood, suddenly frowned and the smile on his face disappeared. What's going on? Why is it so urgent that Jiang Tianyi directly knocked on the door? This thought flashed through his mind. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and cast a spell to open the door of the secret room. Ka. The moment the door of the secret room opened, Ji Tianqing saw an anxious young man in golden armor standing outside the door. It was not Jiang Tianyi, but Jiang Tianqing. Ji Tianqing had just stepped out of the secret room and did not even have time to ask Jiang Tianqing what had happened. Jiang Tianqing was burning with anxiety. He shouted at an extremely fast speed, "Young Master Tianqing, we have been intercepted." As he spoke, he could not help but pull Ji Tianqing towards the palace's main entrance. Intercepted? By who? Ji Tianqing asked with a frown as he quickly followed and walked towards the main entrance. I don't know them, but those 4 fellows are all god kings. As Jiang Tianqing spoke, he unsheathed his sword and exuded an intense fighting spirit. 7th brother said that he knows one of the god kings and that he is currently dealing with them. Jiang Tianqing's words were muddled, and Ji Tianqing did not understand what was going on. He simply stopped asking Jiang Tianqing and flew to the palace's main entrance in a flash. Then, he clearly saw the scene outside the palace and understood what was going on. The Palace of Heaven's Will was located in the southernmost part of the Hengshan Empire, not far from the border. The palace was suspended in the air above a barren mountain range, surrounded by clouds and mist. 100 miles ahead, within the hazy clouds, there were indeed 4 god kings. They fanned out and blocked the palace's path. Ji Tianqing recognized 2 of the god kings. They were Stellar Aspect and Bai Feng. There was no doubt that Stellar Aspect and the others had found their way here. Chapter 3486. Ji Tianqing was still in a daze when he saw Oracle Xingxiong, Bai Feng, and the others. There was only one thought in his mind. Although I already knew that Divine Emissary Stellar Aspect had gathered 2 Divine Emissaries and many God Kings to try and kill me on a grand scale, I didn't expect that Divine Emissary Stellar Aspect would try to kill me. But shouldn't they be in the Red Dragon region? Why are they in the Hengshan Empire? Could it be that our whereabouts have been exposed? Oracle Xingxiong has this ability. No. It's definitely not Oracle Xingxiong. Looking at Bai Feng's tired face, it should be related to him. Ji Tianqing vaguely remembered that Bai Feng was not only a high-level god king, but also had the bloodline of the Phoenix clan and a pair of mysterious god eyes. Therefore, Ji Tianqing's first suspect was Bai Feng. Actually, Bai Feng felt very bitter. He was already dog-tired. Wasn't it comfortable to rest in the sky-piercing hairpin? He could rest for 3 to 5 years, and when he returned to his peak, he would be a good man again. But Oracle Xingxiong was different. In just a day and a half, he was lucky enough to block Jiang Tianyi's palace. And Oracle Xingxiong was even more shameless. He had just blocked Jiang Tianyi's palace when he put away the sky-piercing hairpin. Then, the The three divine envoys appeared in the sky with murderous looks on their faces. They fanned out to block the path of the palace. Bai Feng was naturally in trouble. After the sky-piercing hairpin was put away, he appeared in the sky. And he was defenseless, mentally exhausted, and his god power was weak. This was very awkward. He wanted to be like the three oracles, blocking the sky with murderous intent. But he could not. He felt that he was not qualified to participate in this battle. Yes, he was not qualified. Even though he was a high-level god king, in his current situation, he could not even take down Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi, let alone Ji Tianxing. He wanted to return to the sky-piercing hairpin or leave this place to find a place to rest. However, the atmosphere in the field was tense and full of murderous intent. He could not open his mouth. Therefore, he could only stay in the sky to make up the numbers. At most, he did not make a sound and tried to reduce his presence. But even so, when Jiang Tianyi walked out of the palace gate, he noticed him at first glance. When Ji Tianxing appeared at the gate of the palace, he also saw him at first glance. As for the first glance, of course, it was at Oracle Xingxiong. Both parties hovered in the sky, 100 miles apart, looking at each other. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi's eyes were filled with murderous intense eyes. On the other hand, Stellar Aspect Ambassador was filled with pride, excitement, and excitement. His face was filled with a sinister and cruel sneer. He 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 he. His is Xiongzis, his Xiongzis Chenzis Xiongzis at the very least, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi could clearly sense Oracle Xingxiongzis. They could not imagine just how much Ji Tianxing had offended Stellar Aspect Emissary to such an extent that he would hate Ji Tianxing so much. Ji Tianxing was not worried or hesitant at all. He glanced at Oracle Xingxiong and said, "You've been looking for helpers to kill me, there's nothing strange about that. But aren't you going to introduce those two fellows beside you? And what's with that soft-footed Bai Feng?" Ji Tianxing was not anxious at all, and there was not even much anger or killing intent on his face. It was just a casual question, as if he was chatting, but there was a hint of mockery in his tone. Oracle Xingxiong was not stupid. He did not reveal Bai Feng's God Eyes Supremes. Instead, he pointed to the two oracles on his left and right and introduced, "These two are the same as me, the God Emperor's patrol envoys, the overseers of the boundless heaven continent. Tianxing, although you are beyond redemption and will die without a doubt, I still have to advise you. But this prince still wants to give you a word of advice. Obediently allow yourself to be captured and stretch out your neck to be executed. Don't wait for us to act, otherwise, you won't even have a complete corpse left." Such a simple sentence, but it contained an intense tyrannical killing intent. Clearly, Oracle Xingxiong was certain that Ji Tianxing was in his grasp. In his opinion, with him and the two oracles present, plus Bai Feng, it was enough to take down Ji Tianxing easily. Even if there were any mistakes or mishaps, the other 11 God Kings would quickly arrive. They only needed to delay for 2 to 4 hours, and they would still be able to kill Ji Tianxing. In short, Ji Tianxing was dead meat. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, "With Bai Feng's current state, it's hard to say if she can even stand up, let alone participate in the battle. So, with just the three of you, you want to take us down? It's a fool's dream. I remember that among the helpers you gathered, there were not only these two oracles, but also many God Kings. If I'm not wrong, you are just the vanguard, rushing over to stop me. There are also more than 10 God Kings on the way to support you, right?" Actually, this question was not difficult to guess. However, for Ji Tianxing to say it so openly, it still made Celestial Aspect Emissary feel very awkward. It felt as if Ji Tianxing had seen through him and seen through all his trump cards. Oracle Xingxiong was inexplicably panicked and worried. He felt that since Ji Tianxing knew all this and could still remain calm, he must have some trump card. But the two oracles, Zhon Ying and Ku Yun, did not think so much. The two oracles sneered, looking confident and domineering. "Ha ha ha. Traitor, you're not too stupid. You know that you're on the path of no return, right? Little bastard, since you know that you're going to die, why are you still standing there? Kneel down and surrender." Although the two oracles had heard from Oracle Xingxiong that Ji Tianxing's strength and methods were extraordinary, they must be careful. But they had been oracles for thousands of years and were used to being domineering. They could not change their attitude of looking down on the common people in a short time. At this moment, they only wanted to see Ji Tianxing helplessly and hopelessly kneel down and beg for surrender. But when Oracle Xingxiong heard the words of his two companions, his face changed, and his eyes flashed with deep regret and anger. "Damn it! You two bastards, can't you tell that he's just trying to trick us?" Of course, he only thought about it in his mind and did not dare to say it out loud. After all, Ku Yun and Zhong Ying had the same status as him. Moreover, he had begged Zhong Ying and Ku Yun to help. No matter how angry and dissatisfied he was, Oracle Xingxiong did not know how to hold it in. He hurriedly changed the topic, trying to stall for time. But Ji Tianxing suddenly sneered and did not waste any more time. "Ha ha ha! If that's the case, then you can go to hell." As he sneered, Ji Tianxing turned into a dazzling golden light and rushed toward Oracle Xingxiong. Jiang Tianyi also put away his palace. Together with Jiang Tianxing, he unsheathed his divine sword and attacked. Chapter 3487. Damn it! Seeing this, Divine Ambassador Xingxiong really wanted to scold him. Divine Ambassador Zhong Ying and Divine Ambassador Ku Yun were also stunned. Clearly, they did not expect Ji Tianxing to be so ruthless and decisive, directly attacking. However, the two of them immediately regained their senses and confidently took out their divine weapons to counterattack. He. You know that you have nowhere to run, so you still want to struggle? Little bastard, I wanted to let you live for a few more hours, but since you're courting death, we'll fulfill your wish. The two divine ambassadors were not afraid at all. They waved their divine spears and divine sabers with all their might, using their ultimate techniques. Swish, 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 swish. Dazzling blades of divine light instantly bloomed in the sky, illuminating the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. Each blade of light contained the power to destroy heaven and earth, as well as many divine Tao laws. Its power was unfathomable. At this moment, the surrounding tens of thousands of miles became dazzling, and space became chaotic. Under such circumstances, no one could teleport to escape or dodge. The only thing both sides could do was to go all out and clash. Boom, 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 boom. Catcher, catcher. In the next moment, a deafening explosion erupted, reverberating endlessly in the sky. The sky for tens of thousands of miles was shattered, and the ground and mountains collapsed, sending smoke and dust into the sky. Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and Jiang Tianxing all attacked, using their ultimate techniques. Divine Ambassador Xingxiong, Divine Ambassador Zhong Ying, and Ku Yun also did not hold back, using everything they had. The collision of 6 God King experts created a shockwave that could destroy heaven and earth. At the very least, everything within a radius of 20,000 miles was reduced to ruins. Mountains, valleys, and forests no longer existed. There were 7 God Kings present, but only 6 of them participated in the battle. Without a doubt, Bai Feng had turned around and fled into the distance the moment the battle began. Ji Tianxing was right. It was difficult for him to even protect himself now, let alone participate in the battle. Of course, the 6 God Kings participating in the battle were too focused, and no one paid attention to him. Kill that little bastard. Xingxiong, you boasted about how heaven-defying he is, but from the looks of it, he's only SOSO. In the first round of clashes, neither side was able to gain the upper hand. They could be considered evenly matched. Even though Ji Tianxing's combat power was very strong, surpassing that of any one of the 3 oracles, he was still unable to defeat Ji Tianxing. Jiang Tianyi's battle prowess was not bad, he was on par with Xingxiong God Emissary. However, Jiang Tianxing was a hindrance to them. After all, Jiang Tianxing was only a young man in the 5th level of the Divine King realm. Among the 3 God envoys, the weakest 2 were at the 6th level of the Divine King realm. The strongest among them was God Envoy Zhong Ying, who had reached the 7th level of the Divine King realm. Little bastard, hand over your life. Your time of death has come. Accept your fate. After the first exchange, Zhong Ying and Ku Yun both roared and launched a second round of attacks. However, this time, the situation in front of them left them a little dumbfounded. Ji Tianxing held a sword in his right hand and a mysterious black tower in his left. After a few flashes of divine light, two figures appeared beside him. One of them was a handsome middle-aged god clan man in a long green robe. The other was a monster dozens of feet tall, whose body seemed to be made of stone. Moreover, these two figures who had suddenly appeared were both intermediate god kings. In an instant, Ji Tianxing's side had 5 god kings. Their combat power had increased by a large margin. Chao Qingyu and Yank, who had just joined the battle, did not say a word of nonsense. In fact, even without Ji Tianxing's order, the two of them charged fearlessly towards the 3 god envoys without any regard for their own safety. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were stunned for a moment. Then, they unleashed their full strength and charged towards the 3 god envoys. As for Ji Tianxing, he did not wield the sword of burial of heaven to attack. Instead, he pointed the sword at the sky and shouted solemnly, "Sword, come!" Instantly, in the distant sky, tens of thousands of stars lit up. Like a dense meteor shower, they rained down in a frenzy. The 3 god envoys felt great pressure and danger. Their hearts tightened. They looked up and saw that there were more than 28,000 star swords. Each star sword was thousands of feet long and contained hundreds of laws and divine power. They were extremely powerful and violent. Not good. Dodge. What kind of monster is this kid? He can summon the stars with a wave of his hand and turn them into tens of thousands of star swords. Damn it. In the end, we underestimated this guy. He seems to have become stronger again. At this moment, shock and fear flashed through the minds of the 3 god envoys. Especially God envoy Xingxiong. He felt it the most. He clearly remembered that Ji Tianxing's strength was not so terrifying a few months ago. Although Ji Tianxing could defeat him and severely injure him back then, it was a very difficult victory. But it was different now. Ji Tianxing's every movement was exuding a terrifying pressure that was enough to make him feel terrified and terrified. Wasn't this improvement too terrifying? Rumble. In the next moment, the 28,000 star swords slammed into the ground. The divine powers that the 3 divine envoys had unleashed were instantly shattered into pieces and turned into ashes. Not only that, but their divine power shields also collapsed and exploded into pieces. Most importantly, the 28,000 star swords did not disperse on the spot. They covered a radius of 20,000 miles and formed a huge sword net that sealed off the area. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The sword light crisscrossed and intertwined. In the blink of an eye, a heaven-destroying sword array with a radius of 20,000 miles was formed. An unparalleled suppressive force enveloped the 3 god envoys, making their bodies stiff and difficult to move. Not only were they fearful, but their divine power was also greatly hindered and their combat strength plummeted. This made them feel hopeless. Zhong Ying and Ku Yun looked at each other and saw the horror in each other's eyes. This damned beast. How dare he form an array with a wave of his hand? How arrogant is he? How dare he set up a sword array to seal us 3 god envoys? Generally speaking, only a very powerful person would choose to use an array to fight against a large group of weak people. This way, they could kill their opponents faster. If they were of similar strength, this method would not work. But Ji Tianxing had done it. One could imagine how confident Ji Tianxing was. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Soon, the heaven-destroying sword array was activated and released more than 10,000 star swords to kill the 3 god envoys. Countless star swords formed a sword net that enveloped the 3 god envoys and forcibly separated them. Countless star swords formed a few hurricanes that wreaked havoc in the sword array. Many more star swords formed a huge sword that could split heaven and earth and slashed at the 3 god envoys. Suddenly, the 3 god envoys were in an extremely dangerous situation. They were forced to retreat in a fluster. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were shocked. The 2 brothers looked at each other and thought at the same time, "Oh my God! Young Master Tianxing is not only a top divine blacksmith, but also a master of arrays and swordsmanship." Chapter 3488. Ji Tianxing's craftsmanship had already earned the respect and admiration of the Jiang brothers. Now that the battle had begun, his array and swordsmanship skills were equally unfathomable. The two brothers were even more shocked and even fearful. For a supreme being to be proficient in something and reach the pinnacle of it is already a lifetime achievement. But young Master Tianxing seems to be proficient in everything and has reached the pinnacle of it. Is there any justice in this world? In fact, the Jiang brothers were the direct disciples of the ancient clans. They were definitely one in a million talents. But after meeting Ji Tianxing, they realized how laughable they were. A powerhouse like Ji Tianxing was a true peerless talent. That's not right. He's not a young man, he's a senior. So, he can't be called a genius, he can only be called a senior almighty. Thinking of this, the two brothers' thoughts became clear. Originally, they were still worried that they could not defeat the three divine messengers. But now, with a senior almighty watching over them, what was there to be afraid of? They just had to fight. Kill. Damn divine messengers, eat my sword. The two brothers' blood boiled as they waved their swords and attacked the three divine messengers. Swoosh, 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 bam, bam, bam. The divine sword radiance that blotted out the sky and the earth, as well as the dazzling divine arts, poured down in torrents, drowning the figures of the three divine envoys. Not only were the Jiang brothers working hard, but Chao Qingyu and Yank were also doing their best. Even Ji Tianxing was not idle. He waved his sword and used all sorts of swordsmanship skills to attack. After all, this was his first battle after breaking through to the third level of the Divine King realm. He also wanted to use actual combat to test how much his combat power had increased compared to before. Besides, the heaven-vanquishing sword formation was also suppressing the three divine messengers. There were also more than 10,000 giant swords that were constantly attacking and killing. The three divine messengers were in trouble. The battle had only started for less than 10 breaths, but the three divine messengers had already been beaten to a pulp. The first to be injured was Xingxiong. He was the first to bear the brunt of Ji Tianxing's attention. Not only were there 3 sword wounds on his body, they were so deep that his bones could be seen, and he was dripping with blood. Even his left arm was almost cut off by Ji Tianxing's sword. The second person injured was God Emissary Ku Yun. He was in a more miserable state. After his armor was shattered by the huge swords that filled the sky, there were a few more bloody wounds on his chest and back. Then, his left hand was cut off by Jiang Tianyi. This was very humiliating. It was understandable that he was injured by Ji Tianxing. After all, Ji Tianxing had a record of severely injuring Celestial Aspect Emissary and was publicly acknowledged as their #1 enemy. But who was Jiang Tianyi? He had never heard of him before. He was a complete stranger. However, such a young god king with no presence had actually crippled Divine Emissary Withered Cloud's left palm. How could he not feel aggrieved? Thus, Divine Emissary Ku Yun was filled with grief and indignation. He no longer focused on Ji Tianxing and instead focused on Jiang Tianyi. If he did not kill this young god king, where would he put his face as a divine emissary? Divine Emissary Ku Yun crazily counterattacked Jiang Tianyi. This made Jiang Tianyi very uncomfortable and he was in a precarious situation. However, he was indeed a young talent of the Jiang clan. Even if he was suppressed by Divine Emissary Ku Yun's crazy aura, he would not be defeated so quickly. In this way, it was equivalent to him entangling Divine Emissary Ku Yun. Jiang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank targeted Celestial Aspect Emissary. None of the 3 were a match for Celestial Aspect Emissary. However, with the 3 of them working together with the Heaven Punishing Sword Array, they naturally had the upper hand against Celestial Aspect Emissary. Celestial Aspect Emissary was beaten to the point of being unable to fight back. Moreover, his injuries continued to worsen. He was so aggrieved and angry that he wanted to vomit blood. As for the strongest divine emissary, Shadow Executioner, he was naturally left to Ji Tianxing. That was then and this was now. Not long ago, Ji Tianxing was fighting with Bai Feng, who was also in the 7th stage, and it was difficult for him to hold his own. But now, his strength had increased by several times. Not to mention Bai Feng, even Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner was not his match. Rise of the Sword. Sword breaking the 9 heavens. Heavenly dragon slash. Starry river break. Ji Tianxing's left hand formed a sword seal while his right hand waved the burial of heaven. His posture was elegant as he continuously used one ultimate move after another. Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner was beaten until he was dizzy and had almost no strength to fight back. He could only defend with all his might. Even so, thousands of divine giant swords attacked him, making it impossible for him to defend himself. He constantly revealed flaws. Kai. PFFF. Bam. All kinds of muffled sounds were heard as Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner's body kept bursting with dazzling blood. In less than 100 breaths, his chest and back were covered with wounds and dripping with blood. Not long after, Ji Tianxing took advantage of the moment when he was frantically dodging and used the Sword of Annihilation. This ultimate move borrowed the power of the 5 elements world and was one of Ji Tianxing's ultimate moves. Its power was extremely terrifying. Swish. The giant golden sword slashed down with a loud bang. Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner despaired. Kaboom! The divine light he sent out was shattered by the Sword of Annihilation. The shield formed by his divine power and the armor he wore were also shattered by the giant sword. Then, he was also sent flying by the divine golden sword. Only a leg was left flying in the sky as blood splattered everywhere. Boom! Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner flew 300 miles and crashed into the ruins. A huge crater was smashed into the ground that looked like ruins, and countless cracks appeared around it. Without a doubt, Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner was heavily injured and his strength had greatly decreased. Seeing this scene, Divine Emissary Xing Xiong and Divine Emissary Ku Yun, who were already in a dangerous situation, were filled with fear and despair. Even Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner, who was the strongest, was beaten so miserably. Wouldn't the two of them be doomed? That's right. Xing Xiong and Ku Yun were indeed doomed. Ji Tianxing took advantage of the moment when Xing Xiong God Emissary was filled with fear and distraction to teleport behind him. Yes, Ji Tianxing did not chase after Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner but instead charged toward Divine Emissary Xing Xiong. Of the 3 Divine Emissaries, he hated Divine Emissary Xing Xiong the most. All the pursuit, encirclement, and killing that had caused such a huge commotion were all because of Divine Emissary Xing Xiong. This guy was the main culprit. He must die. Spacetime Blade. Divine Emissary Xing Xiong only came back to his senses when Ji Tianxing appeared behind him. When Ji Tianxing waved the Sword of Burial of Heaven and thrust out a mysterious black and white sword light, it was too late for him to dodge. At this moment, Divine Emissary Xing Xiong's face was pale and his eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. Phut! This sword light that contained the laws of time and space seemed to freeze space and slow down the flow of time. Under everyone's gaze, it pierced through Divine Emissary Xing Xiong's head. Blood splattered everywhere. Divine Emissary Xing Xiong's head exploded and blood splattered all over the sky. Of course, there were also more than 20 quintessence shards that floated down from the sky. Divine Emissary Xing Xiong, who was at the 6th level Divine King realm, was killed by Ji Tianxing just like that. Instant kill at the critical moment. Chapter 3489. The headless corpse of the Stellar Aspect Ambassador fell into the ruins, accompanied by a sky full of blood. Not far away, the 2 god ambassadors, Zhongying and Ku Yun, witnessed this scene with their own eyes and were stunned. Especially God Ambassador Zhongying. Originally, Ji Tianxing attacked him fiercely, as if he would not stop until he killed him. But only now did he realize that Ji Tianxing was creating a diversion. On the surface, it looked like Ji Tianxing was attacking him aggressively. But in reality, Ji Tianxing had been staring at the Stellar Aspect Ambassador. He was waiting. He was waiting for a fleeting opportunity to finish off the Celestial Aspect Messenger, and it was a one-hit kill. And now, Ji Tianxing had done it. The Stellar Aspect Ambassador had fallen. This kid is so scheming. He's too despicable. The same thought flashed through the minds of God Ambassador Zhongying and God Ambassador Ku Yun. Subsequently, the killing intent and fighting spirit that filled their hearts instantly dissipated like ice and snow under the scorching sun. Originally, The three god ambassadors could have held on for a while even if they were heavily injured. They could have held on for another 2 hours, waiting for the 11 god kings to arrive. As long as they waited for the 11 god kings, it would be worth it no matter how serious their injuries were. But their plans and illusions were shattered. After the stellar aspect ambassador died, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and put away the divine spark fragment of the stellar aspect ambassador. Then, he waved the sword of burial of heaven again and charged at the god ambassador Zhongying like a meteor. This time, his aura was even more ferocious. The god ambassador Zhongying's fighting spirit disappeared, and so did his confidence. He was instantly terrified. He was already injured by Ji Tianxing, and his aura was crushed by Ji Tianxing. Defeat was inevitable. Swish, swish, bang, bang, bang. Dazzling and eye-catching sword light poured down like a torrential flood. The god ambassador Zhongying did not have time to think and could only defend with all his might. Unfortunately, he had blocked Ji Tianxing's ferocious attacks, but he had not been able to block the violent attacks of the heaven-destroying sword formation. At least dozens of divine giant swords struck him, causing him to spit out blood and tumble back. Shadow Executioner God Representative's injuries worsened once again, and his strength dropped drastically. After flying backward for 150 kilometers, his confidence was completely shattered. His eyes, which had been burning with a raging fighting spirit, had become dull and lifeless. The thought of retreating rose in his heart. No. We can't continue fighting like this. Ku Yun and I won't be able to hold on for so long. Before the reinforcements arrive, we will be killed by Tianxing. He had to escape. Xing Xiong is already dead, we have to survive no matter what. After making up his mind, the Shadow Executioner envoy did not launch a counterattack. Instead, he turned around and rushed to the edge of the heaven-destroying sword formation. He only wanted to shake off Ji Tianxing, break through the heaven-destroying sword formation as soon as possible, and escape from this place. Moreover, he had the qualifications and trump cards to do so. On the other side, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were also in high spirits as they attacked God Representative Ku Yun together. God Representative Ku Yun was so depressed and aggrieved that he almost vomited blood. The moment God Representative Xing Xiong was killed, he had a premonition that he would be in trouble. However, he had never imagined that his opponent would be so shameless. Ji Tianxing went to deal with the Shadow Executioner envoy, while the remaining 4 God Kings all attacked him fiercely. Wasn't this too unreasonable? The Shadow Executioner envoy is clearly stronger, 1 level higher than me. He is your number 1 enemy, your target to kill. Do you all have to kill me? Do you think I'm easy to bully? Do you want to pick on the weak? However, no matter how angry God Representative Ku Yun was, it was useless. When the 4 God Kings arrived in front of him, he could only muster his strength and resist with all his might. However, it was futile. He had indeed blocked Chao Qingyu and Jiang Tianxing's attacks. However, he had not been able to block Jiang Tianyi and Yank's violent attacks. Then, tragedy befell him. Boom, 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 boom. With a deafening explosion, divine emissary Ku Yun was sent flying back, his body covered in blood. His left arm had been completely severed, and his right leg had been severed from the middle, splinters flying everywhere. God Representative Ku Yun's fate was tragic. After suffering such heavy injuries, his strength had dropped by at least 30%. However, this was not the worst. Ji Tianxing, who was not far away, had wanted to use this opportunity to chase after the Shadow Executioner envoy. However, the Shadow Executioner envoy had made up his mind. He had no intention of fighting back, nor did he have any intention of dealing with him. He turned and fled toward the edge of the sword formation. This left Ji Tianxing speechless. The battle had just begun, and the 2 sides had only exchanged a few blows, yet he was in such a hurry to escape. Who would have thought that he was such a cowardly God King? Ji Tianxing saw that chasing after the Shadow Executioner envoy would definitely take some time and effort. After all, no matter how cowardly the Shadow Executioner envoy was still a true God King. However, the nearby God Representative Ku Yun had just been sent flying by Jiang Tianyi's group of 4, missing an arm and a leg. This was an excellent opportunity. In any case, he would kill whoever he killed, sooner or later. In that case, he would kill God Representative Ku Yun first. It was decided then. Thus, Ji Tianxing used his teleportation ability again and appeared behind God Representative Ku Yun like a ghost. Poor God Representative Ku Yun had just stabilized himself and did not even have time to check his injuries. All of a sudden, a sword light as dazzling as the sun shone behind him. Apocalypse sword. It was the Apocalypse sword again. In any case, the five elements world was very powerful now, and the world energy it provided was terrifying. When this sword descended, God Representative Ku Yun immediately despaired. He looked on helplessly as the golden sword light continued to grow larger and larger in his eyes. He wanted to dodge, but he could not. He wanted to block, but he could not erupt with much divine power, and it was too late. Crack! In the next instant, the dazzling golden light engulfed God Representative Ku Yun. When the giant divine sword struck him, there was a loud sound like ice shattering. Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank all watched as God Representative Ku Yun was cleaved in half by the giant sword. Then, the two halves of the corpse collapsed and exploded, spraying thousands of pieces of debris. God Representative Ku Yun had also fallen. His fate was even worse than God Representative Xing Xiong's, his body exploding into pieces that scattered across the ruins. The godhead was also chopped into pieces. More than 20 fragments flew out and drifted down in the night sky. This scene was just as shocking as God Representative Xing Xiong's death. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing both widened their eyes. Shock flashed through their eyes, and their nerves were stretched taut. At the same time, their doubts about Ji Tianxing's strength were greatly dispelled. After all, Ji Tianxing had killed two opponents in a row in a short span of 10 breaths. Whether it was God Representative Xing Xiong or God Representative Ku Yun, they were both genuine mid-level God Kings. Moreover, they were both at the 6th level of the God King realm, one of the best amongst mid-level God Kings. If someone said that Ji Tianxing was not a high-level God King, who would believe them? Only a high-level God King would have such terrifying means. Chapter 3490. After killing God Emissary Ku Yun, Ji Tianxing put away his Godhead fragment as usual. At this moment, there was only one target left in the heaven-destroying sword formation. God Emissary Shadow Executioner. Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, and the others also woke up from their shock. Everyone also realized that 2 of the 3 emissaries had been killed, and only God Emissary Shadow Executioner was left. Then, God Emissary Shadow Executioner's death had come. Thinking of this, everyone turned their heads to the north of the heaven-destroying sword formation. But the scene in front of them shocked them, and their expressions became very strange. Because God Emissary Shadow Executioner, who was the strongest, had not participated in the battle. Even when God Emissary Ku Yun was killed, he had no intention of helping. He actually put away his divine weapon and took out a divine hairpin that was hundreds of meters long. That's right. It was obviously a hairpin used by women, but it exuded a powerful aura. God Emissary Shadow Executioner did not counterattack. Instead, he went into the hairpin and pushed the hairpin's power to the extreme, exploding with the fastest speed possible as he slammed into the edge of the sword formation. He was running away. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the others were very anxious. Everyone rushed toward the hairpin, wanting to stop God Emissary Shadow Executioner. But unfortunately, the two sides were more than 8,000 miles apart. Even if they teleported, it would take an instant. There was not enough time. Unless the heaven-destroying sword formation could withstand the impact of the hairpin. The heaven-destroying sword formation was made up of 28,000 giant swords. Half of the giant swords surrounded the formation, forming a light wall that covered the sky. The other half of the giant swords were inside the sword formation, forming a hurricane, a sword net, and a vortex. That seemingly thick light wall that covered the sky might not be able to withstand the impact of the hairpin. Kaboom! In the next moment, the hairpin hit the light wall of the sword formation like a shooting star. A deafening sound exploded in the sword formation, echoing through the sky. Following the explosion, a huge gap appeared in the dazzling light wall, and thousands of pieces of debris flew out. In addition, cracks also extended out from the gap that was 1,000 feet wide. The entire heaven-destroying sword formation shook and swayed along with it, its energy fluctuating chaotically. In the end, the heaven-destroying sword array was unable to block the sky-piercing hairpin and was broken through by the shadow executioner envoy, Shua. Amidst the debris and starlight, the sky-piercing hairpin passed through the gap and escaped from the heaven-destroying sword formation. Then, Shadow Executioner's pressure was greatly reduced, and he revealed a smile of having survived a disaster. He knew. He had successfully escaped. He wouldn't die. Swish. The Shadow Executioner did not hesitate at all. After escaping from the heaven-destroying sword formation, he activated the space-piercing hairpin and cut through the night sky at his fastest speed, heading straight for the north. That was right. He fled to the north. It was in the opposite direction of Ji Tianxing and the others. At the same time, it was also where the 11 God Kings' reinforcements were coming from. Swish. In the blink of an eye, the space-piercing hairpin had flown 5,000 miles away from the heaven-destroying sword formation. At this time, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, and the rest had just reached the edge of the heaven-destroying sword formation. They had also passed through the gap in the sword formation and chased into the sky outside. Looking in the direction that the space-piercing hairpin had escaped in, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing instinctively gave chase. They also exploded with their fastest speed, chasing after the space-piercing hairpin. Chao Qingyu and Yank were not idle either. They were also desperately chasing after him. However, Ji Tianxing stood in the sky and raised his hand to stop them. There's no need to chase. It's a waste of effort. You won't be able to catch up. Chao Qingyu's expression froze, and he revealed a bitter smile. Yes. The divine weapon of Shadow Executioner should be a king-level upper divine weapon, right? Yank scratched his head and said unwillingly, "Are we just going to watch him escape like this? I can't accept this." Ji Tianxing was more indifferent. He said calmly, "After all, we are not peak God Kings. We can't control everything, and we can't stop Shadow Executioner from escaping. Furthermore, looking at the direction that he escaped in, he should have other intentions. If I'm not wrong, they still have a large group of God King reinforcements rushing over from the north. If we chase after them, it won't be long before we bump into that group of God Kings." Naturally, there was no need to say the rest. If they bumped into that group of God Kings, it was obvious what the outcome would be. Chao Qingyu was inexplicably worried. He asked, "Young master, should we inform those 2 God Kings to stop chasing?" Ji Tianxing shook his head and said calmly, "There's no need. They will be back soon." Seeing that he was so confident, Chao Qingyu and Yank had nothing to worry about. As expected, Ji Tianxing had guessed correctly. After a short 30 breaths, the 2 brothers, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing, returned, panting. Their eyes were somewhat dim, and their expressions were filled with unwillingness and anger. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank already knew the result, so they did not ask. However, Jiang Tianxing was filled with indignation. He could not help but curse, "Damn it! That guy escaped too quickly. If not for that superior king-level divine weapon, we definitely would not have let him escape." Jiang Tianyi did not say anything, but he smiled helplessly. Ji Tianxing comforted him, "It's okay. After this attack, they won't be able to stop us for a long time." Jiang Tianyi thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Yes. They had a total of 3 divine messengers. Young Master Tianxing killed 2 of them. Divine Messenger Zhon Ying, who escaped, was also heavily injured. He won't be able to recover in a short period of time. In this way, the God Kings will be like dragons without a leader and will not be much of a threat. At this moment, Ji Tianxing suddenly turned his head and looked to the side of the heaven-destroying sword formation. When he saw a ball of divine light silently flying towards the east, his lips curled into a playful smile. "Ha ha ha. I was only focused on chasing after the 3 divine messengers and forgot about him." Chao Qingyu, Yank, and the Jiang brothers all turned their heads to look and discovered that within that ball of divine light was the exhausted divine King White Phoenix. The 4 of them immediately revealed gloating and malicious smiles. "Ha ha ha ha, We forgot about Divine King White Phoenix. TSK. I didn't expect that guy to hide outside the sword formation and not escape. I reckon he still doesn't know what happened inside the sword formation, and even more doesn't know that Ku Yun and Divine Messenger Xingxiong are dead. As they spoke, everyone followed Ji Tianxing and flew towards that ball of divine light. Even though White Phoenix was a superior divine king and usually came and went like the wind, as fast as the aurora. But it was different now. He was extremely weak and tired. His flying speed was extremely slow. Furthermore, he sensed that Ji Tianxing and the rest were not far away. He was afraid of alerting them and could only escape silently. In this way, his speed was even slower. But even so, he still could not escape from Ji Tianxing's palms. After a short 30 breaths, Ji Tianxing led Chao Qingyu, Jiang Tianyi, and the rest to block Divine King White Phoenix's path.